Chapter 412. Han Sui stayed in Ten Peaks Mountain for a long time. He discussed some matters with Huoxian. Before he left, he reported his experience of wiping out the demon clan in detail. Huoxian immediately became vigilant when he heard that Demon King Quan he knew how to use a demonic technique. He felt that something was amiss. He couldn't help but wonder, could it be that the Devil's Doctrine is behind these three demonic tribes that are wreaking havoc in Donghua? If the demon clan of the North Darkstar continent and the disciples of the demonic sect were working together, it would be bad news for Qinsong School. It might even disrupt his original plan. Thinking of this, he could not help but look solemn. To be cautious, he brought Demon King Quan He over for questioning. Quan He and the Demon King had lost a lot of their sharpness after fighting with Zhang Yan previously. At this moment, they were in the Yinsong sect. Their cultivation was suppressed by the Talisman Seal, and they were facing a nascent soul Taoist master alone. How could they dare to put on airs as a demon king? Hearing Huoxian's question, she immediately replied respectfully and honestly, reporting to spiritual master Hua, "This little demon doesn't know where this cultivation method came from. It's just that when I woke up one day, this cultivation method was left in my mind, as if I was born with it." Huoxian frowned slightly. Based on what this demon said, this seemed to be the Devil Sect's dream invasion technique. However, this technique was an evil technique, and it was only executed to injure the essence, qi, and soul of the target. Moreover, the target wasn't completely unharmed, so it was rare to pass down a technique like this. Thus, Huoxian asked, "After you obtained this technique, did you cultivate with ease?" Quan He shook his head, "Not so. I was very careful at first, afraid that I would fall into someone else's trap. But because I saw that it was a shocking technique, and that it didn't require any external help, I couldn't help but practice it. After that, I didn't have any abnormalities. This technique could only be used to confuse the enemy and escape. It was fine against people with low cultivation, but it was useless against Zhang Yan." Huoxian could tell that he wasn't lying, so he asked a few more times, but he couldn't get anything useful out of him. He didn't want to spend too much time on an evil king. He was about to dispose of it when Han Sui said, "Junior brother Zhang said he would take this evil king as his guardian spirit beast. Senior brother Hua, why don't you give it to him?" Huoxian thought for a moment before his expression eased up, and he said calmly, "All right, then I'll have to trouble junior sister to go." Han Sui rose to her feet. She said softly, "Senior brother, this little sister will take her leave." Huoxian nodded silently. Han Sui waved at Quan He, and a wisp of smoke flew out to pick him up. Then, he turned into a breeze and flew away. Quan He had no idea that he had just walked on the edge of life and death. He had no choice but to follow Han Sui obediently. Huoxian waved his hand lightly and wiped away the faint fragrance in the cave with a calm expression. Then, he closed the cave door and went into meditation. At the same time, in the clear nether lake, Jiang Zheng kowtowed 3 times to Zhang Yan, officially completing the ceremony of becoming his disciple. Zhang Yan smiled, "Disciple, you may rise." When Jiang Zheng stood up, he couldn't help but feel overwhelmed. It had been 30 years, and he thought he wouldn't be able to see his teacher again. He didn't expect that he would finally be accepted into the school. Thinking about it, it was all because of the kindness in his heart. If Zhang Yan hadn't saved him from the flood, he wouldn't be the Jiang Zheng he was today. If he hadn't come all the way to Chuizhou to stop the demons for the people, he wouldn't have been able to join the school. He thought to himself, if I succeed in my cultivation, I'll have to do more good deeds. Zhang Yan looked at him and said, "Jiang Zheng, you are now a disciple in name. Now that you've entered my sect, you can be considered an in-name disciple. The sect doesn't restrict you from staying or leaving. Besides the clear nether heavenly lake, I have many spirit islands and wondrous peaks here. If you want, you can choose one of them to establish your own abode." Jiang Zheng looked up and said, "Disciple is willing to listen to teacher's teachings." Zhang Yan smiled, "That's up to you. I'll teach you a technique, and you can comprehend it on your own. I'll also give you a talisman to protect yourself." With a wave of his sleeve, spiritual light suddenly appeared and 3 items flew out. One was a sleeve pouch, the second was a horsetail whisk, and the third was a talisman. Each of them emitted a brilliant light and an oppressive spiritual energy as they floated in the air. Jiang Zheng went up to receive them and knelt to thank him again. Zhang Yan counted the days. He had to cultivate the wood elemental true light in seclusion, so he probably wouldn't be able to take care of his disciple. After thinking for a while, a baleful aura rose in him. He took out some of the 4 monarchs' water, Chiganoderma, and clear stone milk left over from the last time and wrapped them in spiritual light. He pointed them to Jiang Zheng and said, "Send these 3 herbs to Lady Luo. I'll be going into seclusion in a few days. If you don't understand anything in your cultivation, you can ask her." Jiang Zheng had been traveling among the mortals all these years, so he immediately understood. Teacher wanted to use him to do a favor and take care of him, so he answered, "Yes, teacher." Zhang Yan waved his sleeve lightly and said, "Go." Jiang Zheng knelt down and bowed before leaving the main hall. The moment he went out, he thought of the many halls and paths here. He had just arrived, so he didn't know where he should stay. He wasn't in a hurry, and he walked forward slowly with steady steps. He looked at the scenery around him, and he couldn't help but exclaim in admiration at the beautiful scenery. Unknowingly, he arrived at the corner of the palace. At this moment, he saw a girl in red with a sweet face and bright eyes walking toward him. He didn't know where she came from, but from her appearance, she didn't look like an ordinary servant girl. Thus, he didn't dare to act rashly and avoided her. Wang Kading came here today to ask Zhang Yan about the difficulties in cultivation, but she suddenly saw an unfamiliar young Taoist standing at the side. She couldn't help but stare at him with her beautiful eyes and said, "Hey, who are you? Why haven't I seen you before?" Jiang Zheng hurriedly bowed and said, "I'm Jiang Zheng, Teacher Zhang's newly accepted disciple." Wang Kading had a look of realization. She then looked at him curiously and said, "So you're teacher's newly accepted little junior brother." In terms of age, Jiang Zheng was close to 50 years old. Suddenly being called little junior brother by a cute and lively girl, a strange feeling arose in his heart. However, he quickly adjusted himself. He thought to himself, how can a cultivator's age be judged by appearance? Maybe this girl's age is far above his, so he said respectfully, "Yes, junior brother is new in the sect and doesn't know the rules. I don't know my fellow disciples. May I know how to address this senior sister?" Wang Kading giggled and said, "Listen well, my surname is Wang, and I'm the youngest in the sect. Since you're here, you should call me 4th senior sister." Jiang Zheng thought to himself, so teacher has 4 disciples. Although he saw that this senior sister Wang's cultivation was lower than his, he had trained in the mortal world for a long time, so he was very humble and tactful. He didn't look down on her at all, and he didn't lack etiquette on his face. He bowed and said, "So it's 4th senior sister, this little brother greets you." Wang Kading responded with a sound of joy. She had previously heard from the maidservants that her teacher had brought back another disciple. She was curious and wanted to find some time to see what he looked like and whether he would be fun. She didn't expect to meet him here. Although it didn't seem like what she had imagined, when they talked, she found a trace of the feeling of being a senior sister. She waved her hand and happily said, "Junior brother is too polite. In the future, when you're cultivating in the mansion, if there's anything you don't understand, you can ask your senior sister." Jiang Zheng saw that she was a person without any schemes. He smiled and said, "Yes, if I have any questions, I will definitely come and ask. I hope senior sister doesn't mind." Wang Kading was even happier. She was also very depressed in the house. Wang Kaiwei and Tian Kun only cared about cultivation and never chatted with her. Now that she saw Jiang Zheng, she didn't let him go. Instead, she dragged him and said, "Come, junior brother, you and senior sister talk about the mortal world. Pick the fun stuff to talk about." She had never been to Qinsong school before and had only heard about it from the elders, so she was naturally curious. Jiang Zheng could not refuse and could only choose some novel things to talk about. Fortunately, he was indeed experienced and knowledgeable. Moreover, with his cultivation base, he was not afraid of ferocious beasts and poisonous insects. He had been to many remote mountains and ancient forests. Listening to Wang Kading with great interest, he forgot his original intention of coming here. She had condensed a xian seed in the past few days and was only one step away from the mystic light realm. However, she couldn't take that step no matter what. She couldn't help but become impatient. However, the more impatient she was, the more she couldn't pass. Feeling dejected, she came to ask Zhang Yan for help. However, after listening to Jiang Zheng's interesting stories, she felt happy and lively. The frustration that had been bothering her for the past few days was swept away and she returned to her natural nature. Suddenly, the meridians in her body smoothed out, as if some shackles had been broken. At this instant, a beam of light shot through the obstacles and appeared above her head. It was a bright red ball in the shape of Xing Ruoji, which hung above her head. Jiang Zheng couldn't help but be surprised. After pausing for a while, he clasped his hands and said sincerely, "Congratulations, fourth senior sister." He had only broken through to the mystic light realm in the past few years, and because he didn't have a teacher to guide him, he had put in a lot of hard work. He didn't think that this senior sister would be able to break through just by saying a few words to him. It would be a lie if he didn't say that he was envious, and the joy of joining the sect faded a little. He made up his mind and said, "Everyone under teacher's tutelage must be like this. It won't be easy for me to have a place here. From today onwards, I'll have to catch up." Wang Kading had only used 3 years or so to break through to the mystic light realm. One reason was because her talent was good, and her foundation was stable. She had used around 10 years to condense her yuan qi. The other reason was that the cultivation technique that Zhang Yan had chosen for her was the one that had been chosen from more than 100 books. It was the most suitable for her, and it was a cultivation technique that allowed her to progress extremely quickly. Adding on the fact that she had the help of the clear dark heavenly lake, the spirit qi here was not something that the caves outside could compare to. Wang Kading was overjoyed for a good while when the difficulty that had plagued her for so many days was actually easily resolved. When she came to her senses, she realized that she'd left Jiang Zheng out in the cold, and she instantly felt slightly embarrassed. Her beautiful eyes turned as she withdrew an object from her pouch and stuffed it into Jiang Zheng's hand. She said, "Junior brother, this is a greeting gift from senior sister." Jiang Zheng rejected it slightly before accepting it. However, before he could see what it was, Wang Kading pulled his sleeve and said, come with me." Jiang Zheng paused and asked, "Go where?" Wang Kading blinked and smiled. "Junior martial brother, you have a senior martial sister and a senior martial brother. How can I be the only one to come out? They should have a part as well." Chapter 413. Zhang Yan had the help of the mirror spirit of the little teapot, so he only needed to communicate with it and he would know what everyone was doing inside the cave. This was why he knew immediately when Wang Kading broke through to the mystic light realm outside the cave. Of the Wang sisters, Wang Kading's talent was the best. She was even better than her older sister, Wang Kaiwei, so it wasn't strange for her to reach the mystic light realm first. However, this was also due to the cultivation method, and it also varied from person to person. It wasn't that the faster one cultivated, the better it was. For example, Tian Kuan might have started cultivating earlier than the Wang sisters, but he was still at the clear qi realm and couldn't break through. However, his cultivation method was made by Gui Zongyao for his reincarnated body. He might be a step behind now, but Zhang Yan dared to say that he would be stronger than the Wang sisters in the future. The mirror spirit flattered on the side. Thanks to the master who borrowed the demon general to practice with them a few days ago, they have been practicing hard these days. Even little Miss Wang's restless temperament has been restrained a little, and she has become much more diligent. Zhang Yan smiled faintly. It wasn't strange for his disciples to have such a reaction. The reason the Yao general was imprisoned as a slave was because his cultivation wasn't as strong as him. Now that the demon calamity was coming, if one's cultivation wasn't as strong as others, they would be at the mercy of the enemy. His disciples were smart. Even if they didn't think of it before, they would be able to think of it after they returned. Other than those who couldn't be helped, no one wanted to end up like this. If they didn't want to end up like this, they would have to work even harder at cultivating. Right at this moment, the mirror spirit's expression changed and she said in a low voice, "Master, Han Suyi is outside the palace and wants to see you." Zhang Yan said, "Oh." He wasn't surprised. He lowered his head and thought for a moment before standing up. I will go out to greet him. He opened the formation door and stepped out. He arrived above the heavenly lake and saw Han Sui standing in the pavilion where the two of them had met before. Next to her was the dejected Yao King Quan He. In his heart, he had already guessed the purpose of her visit. Stepping forward, he cupped his fists and said with a smile, I didn't know that Senior Marshal Sister would be here. I apologize for not going out to meet you. Please come in and have a seat. Han Sui returned the greeting and said, Junior Brother Zhang, I won't be going in. I heard that you wanted to take this Archfiend King as a guardian spirit beast. I asked Senior Marshal Brother Hua for a favor, so I came to deliver this demon to your residence. Previously, Zhang Yan had only said it casually and didn't really want to use Quan He as a spirit beast to guard the mansion. However, this person was much better than the demon general from before, so he expressed his thanks. Senior Marshal Sister Han is considerate. My humble residence is simple and crude, but the scenery is not bad. Since Senior Marshal Sister is here, why don't you take a seat first? I, your junior marshal brother, can entertain you. Han Sui shook his head. This time, I've been out for a while after the extermination of the demon division. I've missed a lot of homework. I'll be returning to the residence to cultivate. Zhang Yan nodded and said, Then I won't hold you up anymore. Guards. Following his voice, two maids immediately stood up. Master, what orders do you have? Zhang Yan pointed in the direction of the heavenly lake and said, Go get the dew from the heavenly lake and give it to Senior Marshal Sister Han. The maids obeyed and left. Not long after, one of them came out with a jade pot and gave it to Han Sui. Han Sui had personally tasted the dew before, and it was refreshing and refreshing. It suited her taste, so she hesitated for a while and took it. She smiled and said, Since it's Junior Marshal Brother Zhang's kind intentions, I'll accept it. Goodbye. Zhang Yan smiled and cupped his hands. Farewell, Senior Marshal Sister. Han Sui curtsied and stepped on a cloud. He looked up into the sky and disappeared into the horizon. Zhang Yan watched her leave, then waved his sleeve and took the Archfiend King Quan He in. He turned around and went back to the residence. In the main hall, he threw Quan He on the ground and said to the mirror spirit, Zhang Jing, trap the Archfiend King in the formation. Don't let him escape. The mirror spirit immediately agreed and pointed with her finger. The formation moved and the Archfiend King disappeared. The entire cave here was opened by the true weapon of the small kettle realm. The mirror spirit could move the things in it at will. Even if there were external enemies who broke into this place, as long as they were not Taoist Dong Tian, they could still find a way to trap them. Seeing that the residence was safe, Zhang Yan waved the mirror spirit away and returned to the small kettle mirror bamboo building. He closed his eyes and continued to cultivate the wood elemental true light. After Quan He was trapped in the formation, the mirror spirit was afraid that he wouldn't be able to cultivate and starve to death, so she lifted the seal. Because he was originally a Archfiend King, he didn't know what to do, so he added a Cloud Sun gold lock and left. Just like that, Quan He stayed there for several months. Besides a maidservant bringing him food every 30 days, no one paid any attention to him. He was originally a Archfiend King, commanding tens of thousands of demons, but he fell into such a situation today. One could imagine the anger in his heart. Although this place was full of spiritual energy, every time he remembered his past glory, he lost the interest to cultivate. He was drowsy all day and became listless. After another month or so, his body suddenly trembled and he suddenly opened his eyes. Then, from the shoulder, another head slowly drilled out, while the other head was still sleeping soundly. He looked around, and there was a hint of slyness and fierceness in his eyes. He turned to look at the chains on his body and said to himself, It turns out that he was imprisoned. No wonder there was no movement in the past few months. Even his cultivation didn't increase but fell, allowing me to get him easily. He took another deep breath and said in shock, This time the spiritual energy is so rich that even my cave residence is far from comparable. Could it be the cave residence of Taoist Grotto Heaven? When he thought of this, he was also shocked. He looked around cautiously, and without hesitation, he executed a spell and released dozens of spells. they floated around the cave residence. His spell was a magical technique of the Jiuling sect. It was invisible and traceless, and it could turn into a trace of qi to explore the way. It was extremely sensitive to the aura of cultivators. As long as the other party's cultivation was lower than his, he would be able to find out more or less. Because the spiritual energy here was different from other places, it should be a cave residence. Therefore, he guessed that this was where Taoist elephant Xiang cultivated. Even though the spell couldn't be detected by other cultivators, he still acted carefully. He probed carefully with every step, afraid that something might go wrong. However, after searching for half a day, he found out that other than the 12th cave mansion, there was a place he couldn't see through. The highest cultivation level of the other cultivators in the mansion was only the 3rd level of the core transformation realm, which was lower than his cultivation level. Even at this stage, he was still very cautious. He thought to himself, the place that he couldn't detect might be the place where the prefecture master cultivated. However, it wasn't that he didn't gain anything from this investigation. He thought to himself, that female demon cultivating in the northeast corner is about to break through the shackles and enter the Yuanying stage. This is a good opportunity. Once she succeeds, and this is where she cultivates, she will definitely be overjoyed and will be defenseless. If I can sneak a spell into her when she is in a state of mind and slowly burn it, I can find a way to arouse the desires in her heart and control her. Then I will have a great help and won't lose to my senior brother. This technique of his was called the heart demon attracting spell. As long as there was a flaw in the cultivator's heart or emotions, he would be able to sneak into the cultivator's body. From time to time, he would arouse the greed in the cultivator's heart. When the cultivator completely obeyed his will, he would become a puppet controlled by him. The deeper he sank, the more he would be unable to extricate himself. And the amazing thing about this technique was that the person who was under the spell wouldn't lose his own consciousness. He would only think that everything he did was his own will and wouldn't think that it was someone else playing tricks on him. He would wholeheartedly complete the instructions he gave him. This technique was one of the secret techniques of the demon sect and was even more brilliant than the original technique of Jiuling sect. However, in the past thousands of years, it was only recorded in jade scrolls and no one was able to cultivate it. If it wasn't for the arrival of the demon calamity which caused the demon cave to be filled with spiritual energy and the appearance of many demons that had never existed before, it would have been impossible to cultivate it. Previously, the reason why Quan He Demon King's concubine fell in love with a lowly slave for no reason and gave birth to a child was because of him. He purposely stirred up the feelings of love between the two of them, which resulted in this ill-fated relationship. After that, Quan He's rage gave him the opportunity to enter the demon's heart. The technique that Quan He was taught in his dream wasn't a technique to confuse the enemy. It was a seed that could be used by the old demon to execute his demon technique and draw out the demon soul. However, the old demon had laid down hundreds of curses on different cultivators. Their cultivations were also different. Therefore, he didn't keep an eye on Quan He all day and night. Usually, he would lie dormant and wait for the right time. It was only when his mind turned and just now that he made a move. Today, he felt that Quan He's willpower was low and his guard was unprecedentedly low. Therefore, he took advantage of the situation and easily turned the tables on him with just a turn of the curse. The old demon probed for a while more before retracting all the curses. Although he wanted to take over the female demon that he found and use it for himself, he thought about it and said, I don't know much about the situation here. I shouldn't act rashly. Up until now, he still couldn't determine the cultivation level of the master of this mansion. If he really was someone from the heavenly abode, then the slightest movement would be noticed by the master. However, if the master wasn't in the mansion, or if he wasn't the heavenly abode, then he couldn't miss this opportunity. After thinking about it, he felt that the only way was to completely take over this body and devour its soul. Then he would be able to seize part of its memories and learn about the situation of this mansion. However, this body would be useless to him in the future. However, with the temptation in front of him, he was willing to gamble. The old demon secretly activated his technique and instantly took over Quan He's body. After reading through most of the memories, he couldn't help but say to himself, so that's how it is. This stupid wolf was caught by someone. This is good. Although the master, Zhang Yan, is not simple and must be a disciple of one of the heavenly abodes people, he is only a core formation cultivator. If I make a move, he won't be able to find out. The old demon was an expert in formations. Therefore, when there was no one controlling the formation, it wouldn't be difficult for him to leave if he wanted to. As for the Cloud Sun Gold Lock, he also had a way to unlock it. However, just now, when he was about to make a move, he suddenly thought of something and thought, wait, the boy that brought me here is very similar to the true spirit of the magic treasure. He can control the core of the formation, so he must be inextricably linked to this formation. So dangerous, so dangerous. It's fine for me to be in this formation, but if I go out, I can hide from others, but I can't hide from the true spirit. If I startle him, then all my efforts will be wasted. Chapter 4:14. The old demon thought about it a few times and slowly calmed down. In the end, he decided not to act rashly for the time being. His heart-leading demon curse had not been trained to the highest level. When he cast it, he still needed to be within 100 feet of the person he chose. Just now, it could have a miraculous effect. Now that he was trapped here, if he did not bind it, he would definitely be useless. However, the current identity of this body was just a prisoner in this cave. Under the watch of the cave's true spirit, not to mention getting close to the female demon, even taking a few steps would definitely cause her to be vigilant. If he wanted to get close and cast a spell, it would be the same as breaking out of the cave, so he had to think of another way. Just as he was thinking about it, Lu Mainyang, who was cultivating in the cave abode, seemed to have sensed something and suddenly felt that something was wrong. She remembered what spiritual Master Tao had said in the past and immediately stopped cultivating, turning to look for what was wrong. But after she restrained her cultivation and carefully organized her qi, she did not find anything strange. She could not help but think, strange, just now I feel a wave of palpitation, like a fierce beast or a poisonous snake is spying on me. But now that I search, I find nothing. Could it really be the heart demon that Taoist master talked about? In the past, after Zhang Yan returned to Qinsong school, she still stayed in the Clear Feather sect to listen to Tao Jinren's lecture. From him, she found out that when she broke into the Yuaning realm, there would definitely be a small tribulation. It was just that she did not know the specifics, so he gave her a special technique. He said that if she could follow his instructions and patiently cultivate this technique, she would definitely be fine. After a cultivator condensed their Fa Li True Seal and reached the 3rd level of core transformation, they needed to absorb a large amount of evil energy and the essence of heaven and earth to nurture the golden core and accumulate the power to break through. The Xin sect called this sleeping in using storage. Lu Mainyang's lifespan was approaching its end. If she still stayed on the deserted island to cultivate, she would most likely die of old age there. So she had to find a place full of spiritual energy and slowly pass this obstacle. After coming to the clear nether lake, her cultivation could be said to have improved by leaps and bounds, far better than before. He thought back to this place within the clear nether heavenly lake. With the obstruction of the formation, even if a great enemy came to attack, he would be able to detect it in time, so he could put this cultivation technique to the back of his mind. However, at this moment, she suddenly recalled this matter. Thinking that what Tao Jinren said would certainly not be without a target, she did not dare to take it lightly. After pondering for a long time, she took out a jade slip from the fragrance bag. With a wave of his hand, he undid the restrictions on it. With a shake of his hand, an illusory image appeared, and on it were dozens of heart sutras. She read through it carefully and focused her mind. He began to practice. Her cultivation wasn't shallow to begin with, so as soon as she activated her cultivation technique, her aura immediately changed, converging and gathering. The old devil was afraid that he would miss this opportunity. However, this time, he couldn't detect Lu Mainyang's whereabouts like before. He couldn't help but wonder, why can't I detect that demon's aura anymore? Could it be that she has left the residence? Fortunately, his attainments in demonic arts were extraordinary. After looking closely just now, he could detect that faint aura. However, he wasn't happy, instead he was shocked. He didn't know what kind of cultivation technique she used, but it actually repelled his curse. With the protection of this technique, it was no longer possible for him to plant the heart demon curse and take over the body like he did before. He sighed in regret. He thought that his luck was bad. Should he settle for the next best thing, to plant a curse on the disciples in the cave and then try to get close to that demon? Just now, after thinking of this idea, he shook his head and immediately rejected it. It wasn't that this method didn't work, but it required a long period of patience and better luck. If the other party didn't bother with him for a few months, wouldn't he have waited for nothing? Maybe at that time, that demon cultivator would have already broken into the Yuanying realm and he wouldn't be able to do anything. He was an elder of the demon sect and didn't have so much time to waste here. Now that the spiritual energy in the demon cave had almost rushed out of the earth realm, there were countless demons. In the past, obstacles that could block him for tens or even hundreds of years could be crossed with a single step. The problems that he had thought about in the past but couldn't find the right path were solved. Most of the disciples of the demon sect were cultivating so that they would be able to do well in the future when they fought against the celestial sect. For him, he cultivated 7 to 8 types of demonic arts at the same time. How could he be willing to stay here? He thought about it carefully. Since this path couldn't be taken, then he might as well try the most convenient and energy-saving path. He chuckled softly and tidied his robes. Standing up, he spoke out loudly, "Jiuling Sect's Elder Kaiden wishes to meet with the Manor Master." His voice rumbled and instantly spread out. Zhang Yan was cultivating wood elemental true light in the cave abode and hadn't moved for half a year. Hearing this, he was immediately alarmed. His eyes suddenly opened, and an intimidating light flashed in his eyes. He opened the small pot mirror and took a look. After pondering for a while, his expression relaxed and he said in a deep voice, "Since a guest has arrived, please come in and see me." Kai Dian heard this and laughed loudly. Using some unknown method, he got rid of the cloud sun golden lock and stood up slowly. He found the array door and after a few turns, he walked into the main hall. Zhang Yan looked at the way he passed through the array and couldn't help but frown. Even though the mirror spirit was taken care of by him and didn't obstruct him, the fact that the other party found the core of the array so easily made him want to perfect the array again. Actually, the array was different for each person. If Ge Songyao was here to preside over the array, it wouldn't matter if it was a little rough. Even spiritual master Dong Tian couldn't do anything about it. However, Zhang Yan's cultivation was far from this elephant demon and couldn't fully use the power of the small pot mirror, so there were more loopholes in the array. Although Kai Dian still looked like Quan He when he walked, he had his own style. Although he also walked with his head held high and looked mighty, it was obvious that he was a person in charge of an area, but the temperament he revealed was different from that of the Demon King. After arriving at the main hall, he acted like he was really a guest. He bowed to Zhang Yan and sat down casually. He shook his sleeves and raised his head to smile at Zhang Yan, saying, "Thank you for your hospitality, Manor Head." Zhang Yan bowed back and looked at him up and down, saying, "Fellow Taoist Kai, how is that Quan He?" Kai Dian stretched out his sleeves and said lightly, "His spirit is gone and no longer exists. From now on, there is no such person in this world." Zhang Yan raised his eyebrows and said, "This fellow Taoist Kai can hide in a cultivator's body, change the spirit, and make others unable to detect it. The cultivation method of the demon sect is indeed mysterious and exquisite, mysterious and unpredictable." Kai Dian smiled and said, "Not at all. It's just a small matter. How can it enter the eyes of the Fong clan? It's not worth mentioning, not worth mentioning." Zhang Yan smiled faintly and made a gesture, ordering the maidservant to bring fruits and vegetables and wine. He then asked directly, "Fellow Taoist revealed your identity today and wanted to meet I. What can I do for you?" Kai Dian picked up the wine on the table and took a sip. He squinted his eyes and said, "Nothing much. I saw that the female demon cultivator in the cave abode is very compatible with my cultivation method. I wonder if you can give her to me. Of course, I won't let you suffer any losses." He directly stated the purpose of his visit without any concealment. Just by looking at the literal meaning of the words, it seemed to be a provocation at first glance, but he said it openly, which made it hard for others to feel bad about it. Zhang Yan flicked his sleeves and flatly refused, "Don't mention it again." Not to mention that Lu Mainyang was the wife of North Star Faction's elder Yen. Even if she was a disciple of his own residence, there was no reason for him to give her away to the demon sect for some benefits. Kai Dian saw that Zhang Yan's attitude was firm and knew that there was no room for discussion. Although he felt that it was a pity, he tactfully did not mention the matter again. He finished the wine in his cup and said, "Since this matter is not going to work out, then please let me go and let this old man's body go. How about it?" Zhang Yan's face was indifferent and he did not say anything. Kai Dian glanced at Zhang Yan's face and said with a smile, "To be honest, fellow Taoist Zhang, this old man is now a wisp of my demonic will. Even if I destroy this body, I won't be able to hurt my body at all. However, if you can open the array door and let me go, I can tell you many secrets that will be useful to you. If you don't want to hear it, then forget it. Although this body has taken a lot of effort from me and it's a pity to destroy it, it's not to the point where I can't bear to part with it." Zhang Yan heard his words and suddenly understood. No wonder this old demon was so fearless. Kai Dian saw that Zhang Yan was still unwilling to express his attitude. He looked around and sighed, "It's a pity, a pity." Zhang Yan secretly sneered. How could he not see that the other party was doing this on purpose? However, he still said, "What's the pity?" Kai Dian seemed to be very regretful and said, "Fellow Taoist is one of the top 10 disciples of the Qinsong school. I think you want to have a place in the sword competition of the 16 sects tomorrow. Please forgive me for being straightforward. This competition is a great opportunity for everyone, no matter if it's the Devil Path or the Xian sect. It's a great opportunity that cannot be missed. However, those who can go to this competition must be in the Yuaning realm. I see that you have not reached the third stage of the core transformation realm. If you can enter this realm in 64 years, just now, you can make a difference. If not, I'm afraid you'll miss this rare opportunity." Zhang Yan heard what he said and felt that he was not lying. He couldn't help but become serious and said, "As far as I know, the date of the sword competition of the 16 sects needs to be discussed by the heads of the sections. It hasn't been decided yet. Fellow Taoist, why did you say 64 years? Kai Dian laughed and patted the table. He said, "I'm not talking nonsense, but the details." At this point, he stopped talking meaningfully. Zhang Yan knew that this person deliberately revealed some information so that he could judge the value of it. If he didn't agree to leave, he was afraid that he would never tell him about it again. He pondered for a while and felt that since Na Quan He's spirit had been destroyed and this devil's body was not here, it was useless to destroy his body. It was better to listen to him explain the whole story. After making up his mind, he said coldly, "Fellow Taoist is from the devil sect. It's really not convenient to stay here for long. Please leave on your own later." Kai Dian stood up and bowed. He said, "Thank you, fellow Taoist Zhang." He grabbed a jade plate from the table, then slapped a black gas into it and threw it to Zhang Yan. He said, "Fellow Taoist will understand when you see it." Chapter 415. Zhang Yan took the jade plate and saw that there were dozens of lines of words on it. After reading it, just now, he knew why Kai Dian dared to make such a conclusion. He couldn't help but fall into deep thought. If this really happened, regardless of whether it was the demonic path or the Shenmen, they could only take advantage of the situation. Moreover, what such a person said did indeed contain great opportunities, but it was also accompanied by all kinds of dangers. Although the truth of this matter still needed to be discussed, based on his intuition, he felt that it was most likely true. Kai Dian saw that he was thinking there and didn't say anything, so he said loudly, "Fellow Taoist, don't worry. I am an elder of a sect after all. There is no need to lie to you about such a matter. Even if I don't say it, I believe that the masters of your sect will find out soon." Zhang Yan smiled and said casually, "As you said, even if you don't say it, the elders of my sect will find out sooner or later. What is the value of your words today?" Kai Dian laughed loudly instead and said, "Otherwise, with fellow Taoist wisdom, how could you not know that if you knew about this a step earlier, then you would be able to take the initiative? I don't have to explain the benefits involved, right?" Zhang Yan smiled and looked out of the hall, saying, "It's already morning. Just now, both sides didn't swear, it was all based on trust. Kai Dian saw that after he told the truth, Zhang Yan really didn't have any intention of stopping him, so he immediately felt relieved. He cupped his hands and said, 64 years will pass in the blink of an eye. Fellow Taoist, be careful. I will take my leave now. Zhang Yan also returned the greeting and said indifferently, I won't see you out. Kai Dian strode out of the mansion. After going outside, he identified the direction, raised a gust of wind, and flew away. After this person left, Zhang Yan sat down and thought carefully. In the past, this was only a competition between the Xian men, and the disciples of the devil sect were only at the bottom. But this time was different. Once the devil tribulation arrived, it would be a battle between the two major forces of the Xian men and the devil sect. It was a battle of life and death. Now, the devil sect actually knew about this first. Could it be that the cultivation of the experts of the devil sect had already surpassed that of the celestial sect? Thinking of this, his heart skipped a beat. It was not necessarily true that the few true masters in the sect did not know about this news. Perhaps they had already known about it, but for some reason, they did not know about it. Perhaps it was out of consideration for the big picture, or perhaps it was out of selfish thoughts. Therefore, he temporarily buried it in his heart, unwilling to say it out loud. If that was the case, it would be a great fortune for him to know this news in advance. He secretly calculated that it would be extremely difficult to step into the Yuanying realm within 64 years. Currently, he was still lacking in the 5 elements cultivation techniques, and he had yet to finish deducing 3 of them. Even if he succeeded, he still had to pass the last stage, Yin sleep concealment. This stage was the one that took the longest time. He had originally planned to use 100 years to slowly refine it, but now it seemed that he wouldn't be able to. He had to make it in time for the competition. Of course, he had to use some extreme methods to get through. Within the Langya heavenly abode, a strange fragrance wafted in waves, thin mist curled up in spirals, the gurgling stream flowed endlessly, and the courtyard was filled with the clear shadows of the lotus flowers. The air was fragrant and fragrant. Zhong Muqing wore a plain white robe and stood on the square with his hands behind his back. He looked at the hundreds of female cultivators outside the main hall, all of whom were dressed in light robes. He smiled and said, Senior Sister Yu, there are more and more disciples in this cave abode. Standing next to him was a Taoist nun with a smooth forehead and a narrow nose bridge. She looked at the disciples in the hall and felt gratified. She said sincerely, Thanks to perfected Master, our Langya heavenly abode is blessed with good fortune, and we can enjoy it for tens of thousands of years. Zhong Muqing smiled and said, Perfected Master has been in seclusion for 100 days, and he should be coming out soon. Senior Sister Yu nodded slightly. After waiting for about half a day, the two of them suddenly heard a rumbling sound, as if stones were rolling down the path. Then, there was a loud chime, and the heavy stone door on the opposite side suddenly opened. Senior Sister Yu gripped the horsetail whisk in her hand tightly, and her face was filled with joy. She said, Perfected Master is coming out of seclusion. Suddenly, there was the sound of water splashing, and a strange fragrance wafted over. The disciples only felt a gentle breeze, and the lotus petals in the pond in front of them bloomed. A light mist floated past, and Perfected Master Qin, who was wearing a bright moon-purple Taoist robe, sat down on the jade lotus with her phoenix eyes filled with power. The hundreds of disciples below her all knelt down and said, Disciples greet Perfected Master. Perfected Master Qin's phoenix eyes swept across, and she held up the aquamarine Biao Rui in her hand. She pointed at a few people and said, The few of you, come forward. Every 8 years she had to choose a few disciples to teach her techniques, and from then on, they would be her real disciples. The few female cultivators who were pointed out were happy, but they couldn't help but feel nervous. They carefully walked forward and knelt in front of her. Perfected Master Qin flicked her jade finger, and a few sparkling jade flowers flew out and entered the space between her eyebrows. After a while, she nodded slightly and said, The few of you, come and listen to my lecture another day. The few female disciples were overjoyed, and they hurriedly knelt down and kowtowed. Perfected Master Qin sighed in her heart. She looked at these few female disciples, and their aptitudes could be considered passable, but their temperament was inevitably a little lacking. Although she also had the heart to cultivate and become an immortal, the power of heaven was unpredictable, and it was difficult to seek the great Tao. Since the establishment of the Qinsong school, there were only a few people who could fly to other realms, and it could be seen how difficult it was. If they died at the end of their lifespan, they could only reincarnate and cultivate again. As such, it was necessary to train the disciples well, and after the other generation's cultivation was successful, they could reincarnate and enter the Tao sect again. She originally had 12 direct disciples, and 5 of them had entered the Yuanying realm, but 3 of them had already died of old age. Although there were still 2, they didn't have long to live. As for the female disciples in the hall, they were all grand disciples. Although many of them had already condensed their cores, there were only 2 or 3 of them who had condensed their cores, and most of them only had 100 or 200 years left in their lifespan, so they couldn't inherit her supernatural powers at all. Among the lowest generation, there were actually a few good disciples, but their cultivation base was still shallow, and the devil's calamity was right in front of them, so it was hard to say how many of them could survive. She couldn't help but think of Zhou Chongju. Although he only took in 1 disciple, Zhang Yan, it was better than the hundreds of people in front of her. Thinking of this, she couldn't help but feel a little dispirited, so she waved her hand and said, "All of you can leave, Muqing, you stay." The disciples didn't dare to disobey, and after bowing, they all left. Senior sister Yu couldn't help but feel bitter in her mouth. She had cultivated hard for dozens of years, and felt that her cultivation had greatly improved. Today, she excitedly came to pay her respects to perfected Master Qin, hoping to say a few words and get a few words of encouragement, but perfected Master Qin didn't even look at her, and instead left Zhong Muqing alone. In addition to being disappointed, she couldn't help but feel a trace of jealousy in her heart. After coldly looking at Zhong Muqing a few times, she snorted, lowered her head, and left. With Zhong Muqing's cultivation base, he naturally heard it clearly, and also understood why this Taoist nun was dissatisfied with him, but as one of the top 10 disciples, why would he care about this Taoist nun? After everyone left, he tidied up his sleeves, walked forward and bowed. "Disciple greets perfected master." Perfected Master Qin said to him, "A few days ago, when I was meditating, I suddenly felt something, and felt that something big was coming, and in my meditation, I discovered that from today onwards, from that 64 years later, there will be something that involves the fate of our celestial sect." It seemed that this matter was extremely important. Her voice became softer and softer, and even with Zhong Muqing's composure, his expression changed several times, and his mind was agitated. But after listening, he let out a long breath and said, "According to what Perfected Master said, the decision of the ownership of this item should be on the sword competition of the 16 sects?" Perfected Master Qin nodded approvingly and said, "That's right, but this time, we need to go above the extreme astral wind, and that has to be the Yuanying realm." Zhong Muqing bowed deeply and said, "Disciple understands Perfected Master's intention. Now that my cultivation is gradually reaching perfection, in at most 30 to 40 years, I will definitely be able to achieve Yuanying." Perfected Master Qin glanced at him and sighed, "Muqing, I am extremely at ease with you. You and Qi Yuntian are close in age. If I didn't ask you to be my disciple back then, and delayed your cultivation a lot, I'm afraid you would have already achieved Yuanying." Zhong Muqing hurriedly knelt down and said loudly, "Perfected Master's great kindness, and the 100 years of meticulous nurturing, disciple will never forget it. Even if 100 generations, I will not be able to repay it. How can I dare to have any resentment?" Perfected Master Qin smiled lightly, and raised her white wrist and said, "You can stand up." Zhong Muqing didn't dare to disobey, and stood up. Perfected Master Qin said to him gently, "If you can return from that place this time and take that item back in the future, the position of Duzhen Hall Master will definitely be yours." Although she said it casually, after Zhong Muqing heard it, he couldn't help but feel a sense of joy in his heart. Of the 3 Hall Masters, only the upper extreme Hall Master's position had been confirmed, and in the future, it would definitely be Qi Yuntian's. As for the Daylight Hall Master's position, it seemed that Huoxian had the highest chance to take over. However, Miss Chen seemed to be dissatisfied with him, and he was only a son-in-law, so she might not completely trust him. It was hard to say what would happen in the future. But if nothing unexpected happened, it would definitely be obtained by the aristocratic families. As for the position of Duzhen Hall Master, perfected Master Qin favored Zhong Muqing. In her opinion, whether it was cultivation, lifespan, or seniority, this child was the most suitable. As long as she had this position, even if sect head's senior brother used perfected Master Peng to keep her in check, she would still be in an invincible position. Therefore, this matter must not be taken lightly. Perfected Master Qin glanced over and saw the joy on Zhong Muqing's face, but she didn't blame him. She only reminded him, "Don't be careless. This time, it's not like you don't have opponents. Zhuang Bufan, Luo Qingyu, and Ning Chongxian are all outstanding people. There's also that Zhang Yan. I guess he will definitely compete with you, so you have to be extra careful." Zhong Muqing was puzzled and said, "Perfected Master, junior brothers Zhuang, Luo, and Ning are fine, but that Zhang Yan is only now second stage of core transformation. How is it possible for him to step into the Yuanying stage in 60 years? Perfected Master Qin said lightly, "If sect head's senior brother helps, it won't be difficult." Zhong Muqing was shocked and said, "Perfected Master, are you saying that sect head's senior brother intends to support that Zhang Yan to replace the disciple?" Perfected Master Qin's expression was slightly cold as she said, "Sect head's senior brother's cultivation deepens, and his thoughts become more and more difficult to guess. It's fine if he stays out of this matter, but if he insists on making things difficult for me, then I won't sit still and wait for death. At that time, I can only ask Uncle Master to come forward and uphold justice." Zhong Muqing was shocked at first when he heard this, then he was delighted. If he could ask this Grand Supreme Elder to come forward, then it would really be foolproof. Chapter 416. Inside Zhang Yan's main residence, the room was filled with jade green. Hundreds and thousands of rays of light shone from Zhang Yan's body. Halos appeared and flickered in the residence, turning into thousands of strands, as if the cave walls were painted with a layer of jade green. Zhang Yan opened his eyes and carefully sized up the misty bluish-green splendor. He saw that there seemed to be an infinite amount of life force hidden within it. It was about to move, but he couldn't restrain it no matter what, so he withdrew the spell and no longer suppressed it. The jade-green light was suddenly unrestrained and expanded outwards, giving out a deafening sound. The four walls and the ground shook, as if it wanted to push open the cave. The mirror spirit was so shocked that it immediately came out and operated the formation to stabilize the place. Zhang Yan's expression was filled with joy. He practiced the true light for a long while. Just now he started to retract it. In just a short while, he had absorbed it into his body. This joy only lasted for a moment. He pinched his fingers together and calculated, and then his expression turned serious. Another 7 years had passed in the blink of an eye. Although it was faster than he had expected, and his wood elemental true light had achieved initial success, there were only 57 years left before the sword duel, and time was getting more and more pressing. The next step would be to use the 9 true scriptures to deduce the cultivation method. Based on the current situation with the help of the broken jade, he would at most use 1.5 years to be able to deduce the wood element true light technique. It was just that he still didn't have the whereabouts of the metal and fire qi. Before Lu Yenyi left, he had specially instructed to find these 2 qi. With his understanding of his eldest disciple, as long as he entrusted this matter to him, he would definitely do his best to complete it. Calculating the time, he was about to return. He couldn't rush it. If everything went smoothly, then the remaining 2 true light, after his eldest disciple returned, he would be able to cultivate it in about 20 years. With that, the 5 elements would merge into one and he would be able to complete it. After that, he would have to find a way to condense the true seal and step into the 3rd realm of core transformation. What was left for him was about 30+ years. The stage of hibernating in and using hidden qi needed to swallow a huge amount of heaven and earth qi. There was no shortcut to speak of. Even with the help of the broken jade, it wouldn't be of much use. Duda, Xiaochua, Zhuang Bufan, Luo Qingyu and the others, which one of them had not entered this realm long ago? However, they all stopped at this stage, which showed how difficult it was. This wasn't because they weren't diligent, but because the higher the grade of the pill, the more time it would take. Zhang Yan thought to himself that his Dan had reached the first grade. It would only take longer. To break into the Yuanying state in such a short period of time was almost as difficult as ascending to the heavens. He pondered for a long time and suddenly thought of something. Why did he have to think about such a difficult problem alone? There was no harm in asking the sect leader for advice. Let's see if there's a way. With this thought in mind, he left the residence and headed to the floating sky palace. With the help of the talisman, he soon arrived at the side hall that he had been to before. After reporting his name, the boy recognized him and immediately went in to report. After a short while, he walked out and said that the sect master had summoned him. Inside the hall, Zhang Yan went forward and bowed. "Greetings, sect leader." Sect leader Qin's warm voice came from the high platform. "Zhang Yan, why aren't you cultivating in the cave? Why are you here?" Zhang Yan answered, "I have some doubts, so I came to ask for your guidance." Sect leader Qin said, "Speak." Zhang Yan didn't hide anything and told him about Kai Dian. He just left out many details. In the end he said, "I don't know if this is true or not." When the sect leader heard this, he said with a smile, "You already know that this is true, so why ask me? It's just that it's not the right time yet, so it's not convenient for me to tell the disciples. Don't spread it around." Zhang Yan bowed and said, "I want to go to the sword competition conference, but I have some difficulties. I hope sect leader can guide me." Sect leader Qin looked at him and held his horsetail whisk, as if thinking about something. Sect leader Qin looked at him and pinched his horsetail whisk, as if he was thinking about something. After a while, he seemed to have made up his mind and said in a clear voice, "Since you already know about this, it is also your fate. This is the will of the heavens. I will show you a path. If you can condense your spiritual power and true seal within 20 years, you can come to the floating heavenly palace to cultivate. Remember, I will only give you 30 years. Whether you can succeed or not will depend on your own luck." When he finished, he waved his horsetail whisk and dismissed him. When Zhang Yan heard this, he couldn't help but feel happy. The floating heavenly palace was one of the top 10 spiritual eyes in the Donghua continent. Only the third lord and grand elder could cultivate here just now. The spiritual qi in it was endless and not something a normal cave could compare to. If he could cultivate here, entering the Yuanying realm within 30 years would not be an extravagant hope. He bowed again and said, "I'll take my leave." After saying goodbye to sect leader Qin, he left the heavenly palace and returned to his residence to cultivate. A month later, the dim light turned into a famous cave. Inside the cave, there was smoke from the furnace and candles in the hall. Zhenren Yen was meditating and cultivating. Suddenly, he heard a boy report, "Master, Zhenren Zhu is here." Zhenren Yen opened his eyes and said, "Let him in." After a while, Zhenren Zhu entered the hall. After bowing, he sat on the cattail hassock in front of Zhenren Yen. Zhenren Yen said, "Junior brother, why did you come to my place today?" Priest Zhu waved his sleeves and said angrily, "Senior brother, why do you ask when you already know the answer?" Zhenren Yen chuckled and said, "Is it because the sect leader master allowed Zhang Yan to borrow the floating heavenly palace?" Zhenren Zhu said with dissatisfaction, "Since Zhang Yan can use it, why can't my disciples? That thing comes from the sky, and everyone has a chance. Why does master only favor Zhang Yan?" Zhenren Yen shook his head and said, "The sect leader master's arrangement must have a deep meaning, but you and I don't understand it. Instead of complaining here, junior brother, you'd better go back and train your disciples. If they can pass the test by luck, they will have a chance. Why do you envy others?" Zhenren Zhu was a little surprised and didn't understand why Zhenren Yen didn't care about this matter, which was very different from usual. So, he asked tentatively, "Senior brother, don't you want to fight for it?" Zhenren Yen closed his eyes and said, "You and I are disciples. How can we argue with master?" Zhenren Zhu frowned and looked at his senior brother. According to his understanding of this senior brother, How could he have no complaints about this matter? But he couldn't see anything from the surface. After a pause, he persuaded again, "Senior brother, why are you so stubborn? It's natural to follow the sect leader's order. However, Master didn't say anything to us. If we should fight, we should fight. Why do we have so many scruples?" Jinren Yen was silent for a moment and suddenly sighed. He said, "It's not that I don't want to fight, but it's useless to fight. You need to know that Bu Fan, Qingyu, and Chongxian are all my disciples. But Zhang Yan isn't one of us. If he has a chance to climb to the top of the Duzhen Hall, Jinren and the other three won't stop him." The masters and disciples of the three halls and the aristocratic families each had one lord. However, no one wanted to let the other get the lord of the Duzhen Hall, lest one party's power increase greatly and completely overwhelm the other party. But now, it seemed that Zhang Yan was the most suitable. Originally, because he wasn't a disciple of the heavenly abode, his foundation was shallow and it was difficult for him to stand firm. This was his weakness, but now it seemed that it had become his advantage. From the perspective of the aristocratic families, the position of the Duzhen Hall's lord was an acceptable result for Zhang Yan since they didn't have a choice. Once he took the position, it would be the same as Jinren Qin belonging to two parties. In the future, the three parties could coexist in peace. Sect leader Qin intentionally released the news that he wanted to help Zhang Yan. It might be because he wanted to test the aristocratic families. If their reaction wasn't intense and they could return from the sword competition of the 16 sects in the future, it was very likely that they would push the boat with the current and help this matter. Of course, the premise was that Zhang Yan could achieve yuanying within 57 years. Otherwise, everything would be empty talk. Jinren Zhu said, "Senior brother knows this, but does junior brother not know?" Jinren Yen couldn't help but open his eyes. He looked at Jinren Zhu and said, "Junior brother, do you mean that you have a wonderful plan?" Jinren Zhu seemed to have a card up his sleeve. He said, "If not, how could I come to find you?" Jinren Yen suddenly became a little interested and said, "Junior brother, you might as well tell me." Jinren Zhu turned his body sideways and stretched out his finger. He pointed outside and said meaningfully, "Jinren Qin came to find me for this matter the day before yesterday." Jinren Yan's eyes gradually brightened. He stroked his beard and said, "If so, I have an excuse to make a move." Jinren Zhu said loudly, "Senior brother, thanks to Jinren Qin's help in the past, the change in the sect didn't affect us. Now that she has put down her pride and came to ask for help, how can we not agree? Even if sect leader Master knows, he can't blame us." Jinren Yen nodded and said, "I understand. I will make arrangements in a few days. Junior brother, go in peace." Jinren Zhu had obtained Jinren Yan's promise, so he had achieved his goal. After bowing to Jinren Yen, he left in satisfaction. Jinren Yen sat on the praying mat and thought for a long time. He calculated with his fingers and then said to the boy beside him, "Go and call your senior brother here." Not long after, a young Taoist with broad shoulders and a thin waist walked over. He bowed in front of Jinren Yen and said, "Xiao Ao greets Master." Jinren Yen looked at him carefully and saw that he had already reached the Xian light realm. He said with relief, "Your progress is not bad, but you must not be arrogant and impatient. Remember not to repeat the mistakes of your predecessor." Xiao Ao said solemnly, "Yes, I will remember." Jinren Yen said, "I made an agreement with Jinren Xiao in the past so that you could reincarnate into the Xiao clan. Today, the time has come. You can go back to the clan." Xiao Ao bowed and said respectfully, "I will never forget the kindness of giving me a new life. I will not forget what Master has entrusted to me." Back then, Fang Zhen's remnant soul escaped from the Devil's Cave, and Jinren Yen found Jinren Xiao. After a secret discussion, Jinren Yen paid a huge price to send Fang Zhen to be reincarnated in the Xiao clan. Then, Jinren Yen found countless spirit medicines and precious pills for Fang Zhen and used a magic treasure to help Fang Zhen consolidate his foundation. Jinren Yen personally taught Fang Zhen for almost 40 years, and just now, he had achieved what he had now. Jinren Yen reminded him, "If Jinren Xiao has any orders, listen carefully and don't disobey them. I won't help you. Go." Xiao Ao bowed to Jinren Yen and left to accept the order. Jinren Yen smiled proudly. The situation of the chess game should not only look at the present, but also look at the future. If he only followed others' chess moves and dealt with them passively, he would always be at a disadvantage. A temporary victory was nothing. Now that he had made his move, the result would be clear when the time came. Chapter 417. Zhang Yan held the broken jade in his hand, and his mind sank into it as he tried to deduce it. 3 great Daos appeared in his sea of consciousness. They were the correct path to the wood elemental true light cultivation technique that he had painstakingly deduced. At this moment his body suddenly shook, and one of the great Daos collapsed, leaving only the last 2. As long as he cut off one more path, he would be able to completely deduce this cultivation technique. Just as he was about to continue deducing, he suddenly felt a surge of inspiration. He seemed to have sensed something, and he immediately retracted his mind and came out of the broken jade. He waved the small pot mirror, and the surface of the mirror rippled like water. Only then did he know what had happened. He smiled and said, "So fellow Taoist Luo has also reached this realm after forming the core from medicinal transformation." At this moment, in the hall, Luo Zhao's expression was overjoyed. Her cheeks were flushed red as if she'd drunk fine wine, and her charming dimples were intoxicated like a blooming flower. Even though she didn't put on any makeup, her entire body glowed with a bright and beautiful color. Seeing her like this, Zhang Yan knew that she was just now condensing her core, and the vitality around her was extremely vigorous. It was just like how when he first condensed his core back then, he wanted to soar into the sky and travel tens of thousands of miles. It was the same logic. It wasn't just because he was happy, it was also because of his vigorous qi and blood. Cultivators only needed to circulate their golden core and slowly restrain it, and they would be able to look normal in a few days. Zhang Yan got up and opened the array door. He stepped into the main hall and laughed. "Fellow Taoist Luo has reached the golden core formation, and your lifespan has reached 600 years. Congratulations, I should give you a congratulatory gift." Luo Xiao was still immersed in the joy of breaking through. Seeing Zhang Yan come out to congratulate her, she happily returned the greeting. "I don't deserve your congratulations. Didn't I rely on your help to achieve what I have today?" After a cultivator entered the golden core formation, their lifespan was around 600 years, but this varied from person to person. Some had a longer lifespan while others had a shorter lifespan. Mystic Light Realm cultivators only had 300 years of lifespan, and Luo Xiao had cultivated for 200 years before she met Zhang Yan. She knew that she did not have much time left to live. Although she did not show it on the surface, she was anxious and depressed on the inside. Now that her cultivation was complete and she could finally enter the core transformation stage, how could she not be happy? Zhang Yan smiled and said, "It's not a big gift, please don't mind." With a flick of his sleeve, 12 magical swords flew out of his sleeve along with the smoke. Their heads and tails joined together, forming a circle in the air. For a moment, the sword qi was dense, the cold light piercing one's skin. These 12 magical swords were obtained by Zhang Yan from Xiao Mu's sleeve, and they were forged in the Qinsong School's Baoyang courtyard. Although it could not be considered a magic treasure, it was still incomparably sharp. Ordinary magic treasures could not compare to it. Luo Xiao immediately revealed a happy expression when she saw the treasured qi of the 12 magic swords circulating and emitting rays of cold light. She stretched out her hand. The magic swords were all moved and fell down. With another wave of her hand, they all let out a clear hum and fell into her hand. When Zhang Yan first obtained this magic sword, he had never tried it out. He did not think that it would have such a change. After being startled for a moment, he smiled and said, "Fellow Luo, it seems that this item is really fated with you. It should be yours." The magic power on this magic sword had long been erased by Zhang Yan, so Luo Xiao could use it freely with just a little bit of refinement. She held it in her hand and practiced, controlling it to fly around. Seeing that this magic sword could split and combine according to her will, she couldn't help but reveal a hint of joy on her face. She said, "Master, I will shamelessly accept this gift." At this moment, A few of Zhang Yan's disciples also heard the commotion and came out of the cultivation cave. In the main hall, the Wang sisters' eyes were filled with envy. They came up to congratulate her and said, "Lady Luo, congratulations." Jiang Zheng also smiled and went up to congratulate her. However, Tian Kun was not good with words, so he just cupped his hands to express his congratulations. Luo Xiao knew his personality, so she did not mind. Shang Chang and Luo Xiao were the first to know each other, and they were both Yao cultivators. Within the cave, their relationship could be considered the best. She was also sincerely happy for Luo Xiao. After everyone had congratulated her, she then came over and said, Sister congratulates you." When Luo Xiao saw her, her eyes turned and she grabbed Shang Chang's wrist. She led her to the front of Zhang Yan and said, "Master, Sister Shang has a weak personality and has never had any desires. It's just that she has been managing the cave for you all these years. Even if she doesn't have any merits, she has put in a lot of effort. Today, I will ask for a favor for her. Master, please grant her a good cultivation technique so that she can achieve Dao soon." After Shang Chang transformed, she had been cultivating with no other superior cultivation techniques. Seeing that others in the cave could cultivate and seek Dao, it would be a lie to say that she was not envious. However, she knew that she was born a demoness, so she did not have too many expectations. Now that Luo Xiao suddenly asked for a favor, she did not know what to do. Flustered and confused, she said, "Master, this sister." Zhang Yan took a look at her and nodded. "Lady Shang indeed has it hard. Fellow Taoist Luo, I have taught you hundreds of cultivation techniques. Choose one and teach it to her." Luo Xiao giggled and pushed Shang Chang. She said, "Sister, aren't you going to thank Master?" Shang Chang was overjoyed. Holding back her tears, she knelt down and said, "This servant thanks Master." Zhang Yan smiled and nodded. He said, "No need to thank me. You should thank fellow Taoist Luo. Go and prepare a banquet. We need to celebrate with her today." Shang Chang stood up and took out a handkerchief to wipe away her tears. She said, "I'm sorry, Master. This servant will go and prepare it now." Just as she was about to move at this moment, she suddenly heard a long whistle from the northeast corner of the hall. It sounded like the cry of a wild goose or the cry of a phoenix. Immediately after, a loud trembling sound came. The spiritual energy in the cave was instantly stirred up, and everyone felt a strange feeling in their hearts. Luo Xiao was deep in thought. She raised her head and looked at Zhang Yan. She said in surprise, "Could this be?" Zhang Yan waved his sleeve and smiled. "It should be. We will know in a while." Seeing that the two of them were talking in riddles, everyone was a little confused. However, there were also those who were intelligent and familiar with the situation in the mansion, such as the Wang sisters. With a quick turn of their minds, they were able to guess the whole story. At this moment, an auspicious aura gushed into the hall. Everyone looked towards the entrance, only to see a lady dressed in white with long hair draped over her shoulders walking in. She was like a pure white lotus. Her aura was clear and peaceful, returning to one's natural state. When she reached the center of the hall, she bowed to Zhang Yan and said, "This humble Taoist greets the Manor Lord." Zhang Yan was not as arrogant as usual. He solemnly returned the greeting and said, "Enlightened Master Lu, no need to be so polite." This woman was Lu Mainyang. She had already crossed the door and achieved the Yuanying realm that many demon cultivators could not reach. She herself was extremely depressed as well. Even though stepping into the nascent soul realm in one go was something worthy of rejoicing, her lifespan was close to 600 years, and it was extremely unlikely for her to step foot into the avatar realm in her lifetime. Zhang Yan laughed brightly and said, "I didn't think that even fellow Taoist Lu would come out this time. We should congratulate you. If there was a Yuanying enlightened master in the clear nether heavenly lake, it would be very different from the past. From now on, he would not have to worry about enemies coming to find him. In the future, if he wanted to travel far away, he could go with peace of mind." After receiving Zhang Yan's order, Shang Chang immediately went to make arrangements. She ordered all the maids in the mansion to work and set up a banquet. In just a moment, the maids were like butterflies flying through flowers. They walked around the hall and kept serving delicacies. In this clear nether heavenly lake, there were strange fish and beasts, precious fruits and delicacies. Usually, there were not many guests. There were many cultivators in the mansion, so they rarely took them out to make food. Today, taking advantage of this opportunity, they brought them all out and filled the table in front of the hall. Wang Kading was born in a big family and loved crowds. At this moment she muttered, "There's wine but no songs. Boring, boring." Luo Zhao's ears were sharp. When she heard her voice, she turned her head and looked at her. She smiled sweetly and said, "Little Miss Wang is right. Sister Shang's clansmen are good at singing and dancing. It's just that they need to borrow the water to dance." Yuji beauties were famous for their singing and dancing. Especially their dance moves, they were top-notch. However, because it was a dance in the water, people rarely saw it. Lu Mainyang smiled lightly and said, "What's so difficult about it? Let's see how I do it." She raised her hand and pinched her fingers. She sucked a breath over. She muttered something and pointed downwards. The sound of water was heard. A clear spring was drawn from the basin and water jar placed in the corner of the hall. It landed on the ground. Water vapor came from all directions and gradually gathered. In the end, it turned into a pool. It was 1,000 feet wide, enough for dozens of Yuji to dance in it. Zhang Yan had never seen the dance of Yuji. When he was about to take a closer look, the mirror spirit came out of nowhere and whispered in his ear, "Master, that Xiao Yi wants to see you. He said he has something important to tell you." Zhang Yan's expression didn't change. Using the opportunity of drinking, he said, "Bring him to the back hall and wait. I'll see him later." During the competition that day, Zhang Yan promised Xiao Yi to return Xiao He from the clan. However, this person had already taken over Xiao Yi's body and left. This was a spy that Zhang Yan had conveniently planted that day. He didn't take it to heart. However, this person was bold and ruthless. He also had some intelligence. He wouldn't come here for no reason. Thus, he decided to see him. Xiao Yi was led to the back hall to wait. He didn't show any impatience. He waited calmly for an hour. Just now, when he saw Zhang Yan strolling in, he immediately stood up and bowed deeply. He said respectfully, "Greetings, Chief." Zhang Yan reached out and pressed down on him. He sat down on the main seat and said in a deep voice, "You must have a reason for coming to find me. Is there something important?" Xiao Yi paused and said in a low voice, "It's not anything important. It's just that there's someone who is very suspicious. He might be harmful to Chief. I had some free time to leave the clan today. This is a rare opportunity, so I came to report to Chief." When he said this, he looked up and saw that Zhang Yan was listening. He continued, "Half a year ago, a new clansman came to my Xiao clan. His name is Xiao Ao. He's also in the mystic light realm. Although he claims to be a member of my Xiao clan and has been cultivating for more than 30 years, the strange thing is that I've never heard of him before." He laughed self-mockingly and said, I'm not afraid of Chief laughing at me. I have a problem with being overly suspicious. Thus, I sent my trusted subordinates to investigate. However, they didn't find anything. I don't know who he has been cultivating with all these years. If he was a normal disciple, why would he need to be so secretive? Thus, I boldly guess that there must be something wrong with this person's background. Chapter 418. When this person first came to the manor, no one in the clan knew him, so this lowly one deliberately made friends with him. After a few times, we did have some friendship. One time, when we were drunk, we happened to talk about Manor Lord. I didn't expect this person to actually show some hatred towards Manor Lord. In the Zhao Yu side hall, Xiao Yi explained the situation one by one. When Zhang Yan heard this, he smiled and said, "It's nothing new that your Xiao clansman hates me. Not to mention that the whereabouts of Xiao Mu and Xiao Han were rumored to be unknown because of him, just the profound level weapon, the 5 Spirits White Cark Shuttle, was also obtained by him through trickery. Why would the Xiao clan give him any face?" Xiao Yi hurriedly explained, "It's not like that. He also said that in a few days, someone will come to deal with Manor Lord. However, this person is quite tight-lipped. This lowly one probed a few more times but was unable to get any more information. Remembering that Manor Lord's kindness to this lowly one is as heavy as a mountain, this lowly one specially came to report. Zhang Yan's gaze turned and swept over his face, saying, "At least you have the heart." Shaoi didn't dare to meet his gaze and hurriedly lowered his head, saying, "I don't dare, I don't dare. If it wasn't for Manor Lord's support, this lowly one wouldn't be who I am today." Zhang Yan smiled lightly and waved his sleeves, saying, "I already know. You should go back early to avoid suspicion in the clan." Shao Yi stood up and bowed, not daring to say anything more, hurriedly taking his leave. After he left, the mirror spirit came up and said, "Master, although this person made an oath that day, he must be unwilling. Would he really be so kind?" Zhang Yan sneered, "Of course he wouldn't be so kind. But how could I not see through this little trick? The reason why he came here is because he was afraid that I would make trouble for him in the future after suffering a loss. But just this, he wouldn't be so anxious to find me. I'm guessing that Xiao Ao must have forced him to his current position in the clan, so he urgently came to find me. It would be best if he could use me to teach this person a lesson. Then he can rest in peace." He explained the pros and cons in one sentence, and the mirror spirit suddenly understood. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that this was the case. He couldn't help but say with admiration, "Master's eyes are indeed like a torch. You can see through me with one glance." However, a moment later, he said worriedly, "According to what this person said, I'm afraid that someone will come to make things difficult for Master. I wonder who it is?" Zhang Yan stood up, flicked his sleeves and said with a smile, "Knowing or not, it's all the same. Why bother to think about it? You just need to guard the cave carefully." The mirror spirit quickly responded. After Zhang Yan explained, he did not go to the main hall for the banquet. He returned to the small pot mirror and deduced the wood element true light again. 3 months later, 500 kilometers away from Bright Nether Lake, a sword light that seemed like a clear and cold moon tore through the sky. It was coming here. Lu Yenny rode her sword and flew into the sky. It had been almost 20 years since they parted. She had gone through a lot of hardships and had already found all kinds of external medicines to transform pills. She was wearing a bamboo-colored skirt. Her black hair was like a waterfall, draping over her shoulders and tied with a silver ring. Her expression was more elegant and refined than that day when she left the mansion. While flying, she suddenly felt a sense of danger and frowned slightly. She hurriedly turned the sword light and dodged to the side. She saw a smoke passing in front of her, causing her clothes to flutter. The person who sneaked up on her didn't say anything when he saw that his attack didn't hit. Instead, he controlled a big cloud to cover her. Before it landed, Lu Yenny felt her whole body tighten. It was as if she fell into an ice cocoon. The surrounding cold wind was rustling like an ice cyclone. At a glance, she saw that this cloud spread for more than 10 miles. It was not a place where she could escape in a hurry. She immediately guessed that the other party came prepared, so it was not suitable for her to fly by force. Instead, she took out the profound artifact, boat mooring pouch, that Zhang Yan had given her. She opened it and turned it into a crystal cloud, barely blocking it. She said quietly, "Which fellow Taoist is making things difficult for my daughter here?" That cloud suddenly parted and a middle-aged Taoist nun flashed out from within. She looked at Lu Yenny twice and said expressionlessly, "Lu Yenny, I have been waiting for you here for many days. Come with me now." Lu Yenny saw that the other party was wearing the Qinsong school uniform and seemed to be a core formation cultivator, so she didn't be rude. She curtsied and said, "May I know which senior from the sect is here and where are you taking Yenny?" The middle-aged Taoist nun said indifferently, "You Longshan, can be considered as your senior. I heard that you are an outstanding figure among the younger generation of disciples in my sect, so I would like to invite you to stay in my glittering jewel cave for a few days. Quickly put away your transcendent artifact and come with me. That way, you can suffer less." When Lu Yenny heard the words glittering jewel cave, she immediately became alert. She held the sword palette and said, "Senior, please allow me to report. I have been traveling outside for several years and haven't seen my master for a long time. I am about to return to my residence to pay my respects. After the ceremony, if my master allows it, I am willing to pay a visit to your residence. Yu Longshan waved her hand and said with an extremely unyielding attitude, "There is no need. The relationship between our sect is not shallow. Why should we disturb the seniors for such a small matter?" Lu Yenyi said seriously, "Forgive me for not being able to comply." Yu Longshan became impatient and said, "That is not up to you to decide." She took out a hand seal, and countless grains of white sand appeared in the air. They covered the sky and the sun as they swept over from all directions. They became smaller and smaller, and they were about to surround her. Lu Yenyi quickly used the boat mooring pouch and released balls of crystal clouds to protect herself. Yu Longshan snickered coldly and continued to circulate her arcane energy above the clouds. Instantly, a boundless pressure came crashing down. Lu Yenyi was only at the mystic light realm. Although the boat mooring pouch was a Xian artifact, her cultivation was one realm lower. She could only last for a while before finding it hard to resist. However, she was still calm and didn't panic. She held down the sword pellet and looked for a chance to break out. Yu Longshan smiled in disdain. "I advise you not to struggle. I know that your sword movement technique is amazing and you will be able to escape as soon as you have the chance, but you won't be able to escape from my neon dust barrier. It is better to be obedient." As soon as she finished speaking, a chuckle sounded next to her ear. That may not be the case. Yu Longshan knew that the situation was bad, but before she could do anything, a jade arrow shot out from the air. It pierced through the clouds and created a hole. Although the hole closed as soon as it was created, the opportunity was gone in the blink of an eye. However, Lu Yenyi grasped the opportunity and flew away with her sword in the blink of an eye. A ray of light flew out from within, and in a flash, it was already 10,000 feet away. In another flash, it disappeared without a trace. Yu Longshan's expression changed and she shouted, "Who is causing trouble here? This is the matter of the Qinsong school. Why do you have the right to interfere?" A woman wearing colorful clothes and riding a 5-colored cloud walked out from the mist. Her hair was combed into a bun, and she had a pretty face. She blinked her eyes and pretended to be surprised. "I was ordered by my master to protect fellow Taoist Lu in secret, and I saw someone bullying the weak. I thought it was a demon, but it turns out to be Senior Qinsong?" Yu Longshan's face burned. Ever since she came out of seclusion, she was ignored by immortal Qin, so she couldn't help but feel depressed. Later, she heard that her master didn't get along with Zhang Yan, so she was eager to regain her master's favor. Someone from the same sect came up with an idea, saying that as long as his eldest disciple, Lu Yenyi, was traveling outside, as long as they found the right time to invite her to live in the Qinsong school, they would definitely be able to threaten her and win her master's favor. She thought that this idea was not bad. However, as a core formation cultivator, he felt that he had no face to make things difficult for a junior for no reason. Now that he was being mocked by this woman, he became angry out of humiliation and shouted, "Do you think you can stop me?" She flicked her sleeve. She tossed a jade cup in the air and flipped it upside down. The mouth of the cup seemed to be spitting out light, and it actually contained a strange cold power. Before it arrived, it was as if ice water had soaked one's body, and the coldness penetrated one's bones and muscles. The colorful robed woman cried out in surprise and pointed at her bun. A hairpin suddenly flew forward, and with a ding sound, the jade cup was shaken to the side a few times. Seeing this, Yu Longshan hurriedly used an incantation to straighten it. This jade cup was very special, and it could only be controlled by pointing the mouth of the cup at the opponent. However, as soon as she turned it around, the hairpin flew over again and pecked at it, knocking it to the side. This made her feel uncomfortable. How could Yu Longshan be willing to be entangled with unrelated people here? Originally, she wanted to quickly deal with this woman and then chase after Lu Yenyi. Perhaps she would still have a chance, but the more impatient she was, the more she couldn't get rid of her. The colorful robed woman saw that she was impatient, so she smiled in her heart. Her figure drifted back and forth, but she only entangled Yu Longshan. Every time a killing move came, she would dodge far away, and when she wanted to leave, she would go forward to stop her. After exchanging blows for a moment, Yu Longshan knew that she could no longer catch up to Lu Yeni, so she gave up and focused on fighting this woman. After all, she was under Taoist Master Dong Tian, so she was experienced and knowledgeable. After exchanging blows for a while, she saw through this woman's background. She sneered and said, "I was wondering who was so daring to go against my Qinsong school. So it's a disciple of Li Mountain sect." Li Mountain sect was also one of the 10 sects of Xianmen, but compared to the other sects, their foundation was the shallowest, and they had only risen for a few thousand years. However, compared to the other 9 sects, they still had some advantages. The founding ancestor of the sect was still in the mountain. Almost with her strength alone, this sect just now had a foothold in the world. The colorful robed woman's background was exposed, but she didn't panic at all. She only said, could this Tao friend be one of the top 10 disciples of Qinsong school? Or is it because you're an elder in the sect? Why do you keep using the status of Qinsong school to pressure people? Are you bullying me because I'm not sensible? Yu Longshan was mocked by her words and felt even more embarrassed. She shouted and said, Good. So the disciples of Li Mountain sect are all so eloquent. You blocked my way for no reason. Today, I'll capture you and let someone from your sect come to my residence to take you away." She stretched her hand into the sachet, and just as she was about to move, she felt a burst of cold air assaulting her. She was startled and hastily tilted her head to the side. A cold sword chi brushed past her forehead. Although she wasn't injured, her hair was disheveled, and she was in a sorry state. She couldn't help feeling shocked and angry at the same time. She looked up into the clouds and saw Lu Yeni's sleeves fluttering in the wind. She was standing there with 12 sword lights intertwining and circling around her. She was looking at her calmly. Yu Longshan didn't expect Lu Yeni to not leave just now. She actually dared to hide in the clouds and wait for a chance to kill her. Her hair was messed up by a junior. Even if she captured Lu Yeni and brought her back, she wouldn't be able to face anyone. After being stunned for a moment, she sighed and covered her face with her sleeves. She flew away on the clouds. The colorful robed woman saw that she had left and came up on the clouds. She said in surprise, "Tao friend Lu, why haven't you left?" Lu Yeni bowed to her solemnly and said, "Tao friend helped me escape. How can I leave without you?" Chapter 419. Hearing Lu Yeni's words, the colorful clothed woman had a good impression of her. She grinned at her and said, "Fellow Taoist Lu, aren't you afraid that the nun will go back and capture you? That treasure of hers is very strange, and she's on guard now. If I attack again, I might not be able to stop her." Lu Yeni smiled and shook her head. "It's fine. That senior used a treasure to capture me just now, which means that she doesn't have the confidence to stop the sword escape technique. That's why I dared to come back." The colorful clothed woman was stunned. After thinking about it again, it was indeed logical. However, to think of this in a critical moment, one had to be extremely calm and meticulous. She couldn't help but stare at Lu Yeni with her beautiful eyes wide open. She thought to herself, "No wonder Master ordered me to secretly protect her. She really has a good eye for people and has never been wrong. This fellow Taoist will definitely be extraordinary in the future. Now that we've formed a good relationship, our sects will be considered friends." As she was thinking, Lu Yeni bowed to her again and said, "I haven't asked for your name yet." The colorful clothed woman didn't accept her bow and moved to the side. She smiled and said, "I'm a disciple of Perfected Chao. My surname is Lu and my name is Qing. Nowadays, the demonic sects are becoming more and more rampant in the Donghua continent. Master is worried that it's not appropriate for you to return alone, so he ordered me to escort you." Lu Yeni's eyes lit up and revealed surprise. She then sighed and said, "So you're Senior Chao's disciple. I've benefited a lot from Senior's guidance previously. I haven't thanked you yet, and I've troubled Senior's sister to send me back. I don't know how I can repay Senior's care and concern." Perfected Chao was a Yuanying elder of the Lishan sect. She was originally from the Wei imperial family, but she wasn't from the same branch as the current Wei royal family. Due to her outstanding talent, she was taken in as a disciple by the current patriarch of the Lishan sect. It was also because Lu Yinyi came to the territory of the Lishan sect in search of medicine and met her by chance. Seeing that Lu Yinyi's talent and temperament were both extraordinary and extremely similar to her younger self, Perfected Chao had the intention of taking her in as a disciple. However, after asking around, she found out that she was originally under the Qinsong school and was the disciple of one of the top 10 disciples, Zhang Yan. He couldn't help but feel that it was a pity, so he gave her a few pointers. Because he really liked her, after Lu Yinyi left, he specially ordered Lu Qingmei to secretly escort her, just in case anything happened. At the same time, he could also do Zhang Yan a favor. Lu Qingmei waved her hand. "It's just a small matter, don't worry about it, Taoist Lu." Lu Yinyi smiled. "Senior Sister Lu, the bright nether heavenly lake is not far away. Why don't you come to the manor and have a seat?" Lu Qingmei shook her head and declined. "No, since you're safe, it's good enough. I still need to return to the cave residence to report on the completion of the task, so I won't disturb fellow Taoists' reunion." Lu Yinyi did not force him. They were both cultivators and had long lifespans. They would meet again in the future. She entrusted Lu Qingmei and Taoist Master Chao with a few words of blessing before bidding them farewell and returning to the clear nether heavenly lake. In the small pot mirror, Zhang Yan was sitting on the top of the bamboo house with his eyes closed, circulating his Xian Qi. In the small pot mirror, he had already deduced the wood elemental true light technique and was now practicing it. Suddenly, the mirror spirit came out and came to the front. She said happily, "Master, Lu Nyangzi has returned and is waiting outside. She wants to see you." Zhang Yan opened his eyes and smiled. "Yinyi has been gone for more than 10 years, but she came back earlier than I expected. Go and bring her in to see me." The mirror spirit hurriedly accepted the order and went outside. She smiled at Lu Yinyi. "Lu Nyangzi, please follow me." He turned around, and as the mirror light flashed, Lu Yinyi felt a bright light in front of her. Then, she entered a place filled with fragrant trees, flowers, and a gurgling stream. Even though she was Zhang Yan's eldest disciple, it was the first time she entered the small pot mirror. She unconsciously took a few more glances. She saw that the pond water was clear, the sky was blue, and the fragrance assailed her nostrils. Butterflies fluttered and fishes swam in the water. It was clearly a world of its own. She was amazed. When she arrived at the bamboo house, she saw Zhang Yan sitting on the couch and looking at her with a smile. She hurriedly knelt on the ground and kowtowed. Disciple Lu Yinyi pays respect to master and wishes for a long life. Zhang Yan saw that her body was full of qi of Tao. It was obvious that her cultivation had improved a lot since they parted. He raised his hand and said, "Disciple, get up quickly." Lu Yinyi bowed again and stood up. Zhang Yan asked gently, "Yinyi, what realm have you cultivated to now?" Lu Yinyi bowed and answered truthfully, reporting to master, "Disciple has reached the burning acupoint stage. Now I have opened 24 acupoints." 24 acupoints. That's not easy. Zhang Yan nodded slightly. The more acupoints a cultivator opened, the stronger the true fire and the greater the success of calcining the Jindan. He said, "Then you still need to work hard for a few more days. It won't be too late to condense the Jindan after you have opened a few more acupoints." He pointed with his finger and a golden talisman flew out. He said, "This is the burning acupoint and the various acupoints. You have to remember it and don't underestimate it." When he opened 36 acupoints that day, it was due to fate. He had the mind-penetrating technique, so his corporeal body was not comparable to a normal cultivator. He also had the help of the remnant jade. He had to rely on himself to explore the acupoints and could not purely imitate it. However, ever since he became one of the top 10 disciples, he had read all the books in the Jinluo courtyard. There was no lack of books that talked about the key to opening acupoints. Those who could enter the Jinluo courtyard to read books had to be at least in the core transformation realm. Their status in the sect was not low, so there were some methods that were not hidden from him. Even if Zhang Yan did not use it himself, it did not mean that the sect would not use it. That was why he paid attention to it that day and read through it once. He remembered many of the key points. However, he would not use the experience of others. One of the advantages he had was that he could repeatedly test the method in the remnant jade. His experiments were successful, so he came up with a set of acupoint opening method. It could be said that this method could be passed down and become the sect's secret method. Lu Yeni relied on her innate talent to burn 24 acupoints. Later on, as her progress slowed down, she could vaguely feel that there might be a key point. Now that she saw Zhang Yan teaching her, she knew that it was a secret method. She held her breath and solemnly accepted it. Then she knelt down and kowtowed to thank her master. Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Disciple, stand up and talk." Lu Yini stood up. She reached into the sachet and took out 2 porcelain bottles. She held them in her palm and said, "Before Master left, you told Disciple to pay attention to the metal and fire qi. Disciple did not dare to forget, so I paid special attention to it. I also relied on some luck to be able to gather all of them." Zhang Yan's spirit was lifted. He waved his sleeve and a wisp of smoke flew out, sucking the 2 porcelain bottles over. He opened them and said, "Not bad, this is the metal essence qi of Gingxin and fire essence qi of Gingxin. Disciple, you have done a great service this time." Lu Yeni's eyebrows were slightly worried. She bowed and said, "Serving Master is a disciple's responsibility. I dare not claim credit. It's just that these 2 qis are extremely rare. Disciple only has a little. Is it enough for Master?" Zhang Yan looked at the 2 jade bottles and said with a smile, "It's enough." He did not want to cultivate the Taishan true light to the highest level. He only needed to be able to use it a little, then he could reverse the 9 mantras and use the power of the Dan Sha to refine it again. From then on, he would be able to get rid of the barriers and achieve a mystic technique. His disciple returned home and obtained the last 2 qis of the 5 elements true light. He was also in a good mood, so he asked Lu Yeni about her experiences along the way. Lu Yeni also answered attentively and told him about the current situation in the Donghua continent. This conversation between master and disciple actually took half a day. Zhang Yan then asked about the origin of the metal and fire qi. Just now, he knew that the metal essence qi of Gingxin was a gift from a female cultivator of the Yuanyang sect, but Lu Yeni did not know her name. As for the fire qi of Gingxin and Ding, it was obtained by Lu Yeni in a Feizhou celestial market in the south of the Donghua continent. Fortunately, she brought a lot of spirit shells with her before she left, and she spent everything to buy it. It was not an exaggeration to say that it was luck. If it were not for the qi of fire essence here, Lu Yeni would probably have to delay for a few more years. Just now, she was able to return home. In the end, Lu Yeni thought about it and decided to tell Zhang Yan about the attack when she returned home. It was not that she was bullied and wanted to complain to her master. Back then, when Zhang Yan was not yet one of the top 10 disciples in the sect, when he went out to look for medicine, the situation she faced was many times more difficult than what she was facing now. But she still made it through, and she was not that delicate. She was just worried that this matter might be harmful to the sect, so she had to mention it. After listening to her, Zhang Yan thought for a while, then nodded and said, "I already know about this matter. Go back and cultivate well. In a few days, I will personally protect you and help you condense the medicine into the core." Lu Yeni bowed and said, "Yes, master. I will take my leave." After sending this disciple out of the small pot mirror, Zhang Yan thought about it and shook his head slightly. It was unlikely that perfected Qin had sent someone from his sect to make things difficult for his disciple. No matter what, perfected Qin was still a perfected grotto heaven. Even if he really wanted to plot against him, why would he cast his eyes on his disciple? Moreover, it would be too damaging to his identity, and if word got out, he would not be able to keep his face. Therefore, he guessed that it was very likely that Yu Longshan had taken matters into her own hands. However, there was no smoke without fire. He could also sense the hidden hostility that the glittering grotto heaven had towards him behind this matter. He and perfected Peng had helped each other, so it was reasonable that perfected Qin did not like him. Zhang Yan had already expected this. However, logically speaking, even if he wanted to make things difficult for him, he should have waited for the right opportunity to act. It was a little puzzling that he had chosen this time. He thought about it carefully. These days, he had rarely left the mansion. The only time he did was to see sect leader Qin. This thought only lasted for a while before he came to a realization. The problem was very likely this. Sect leader Qin had promised him to go to the floating heavenly palace to cultivate. It was very likely that perfected Qin was unhappy with him because of this. Thinking about it this way, he cleared up his thoughts. There was also the matter of Xiao Ao. Now that he thought about it, it was probably related. Zhang Yan vaguely seemed to see a large net covering him. He sneered. Indeed, the benefits could not be obtained by him without any reason. It seemed that he had to go through some twists and turns. However, there was no need to think so much about it now. The most important thing right now was to cultivate the remaining 2 true lights. After deducing the cultivation method, he could refine the 5 elements mysterious skill into one. After that, he would condense the true seal of mana and raise his strength to another level. Only then would he have more confidence to speak. Chapter 420. Since Zhang Yan was preparing to go into closed-door training, it might take a long time, so he wanted to take care of all the worldly matters. He silently calculated the time. There were still 5 years before the next sect competition, but if he was right, there should not be many changes in the sect, so it did not matter whether he went or not. Currently, no one in the younger generation of the sect could compete with the top 10 disciples of his generation. The aristocratic families were declining, but there were many talented people in the sect, such as Feng Ming, Mo Tianhua, and others. Although there was news that they had turned medicine into pills and condensed pills, they were still far behind them due to the lack of foundation. Only Yu Chongyang was unfathomable, and no one knew his exact background. Although he was not a disciple of any enlightened abode master, he had a divine object that chose its master. Decades ago, he and Huang Fuzhou were known as the twin talents, and they had formed pills earlier than Zhang Yan. However, this person was low-key and obsessed with cultivation. He was in closed-door training all year round and rarely showed his face. It seemed that he had no intention of fighting for a position. As for Qinan, she was like Lu Yenny. Although she had reached the stage of burning acupoints, she had not turned medicine into pills and condensed pills. This was because Immortal Peng deliberately polished her foundation. Just now, her progress had slowed down. However, even if she could enter the transforming core realm in the next few years, she did not have many means to fight. Zhang Yan had promised Immortal Peng that he would help Qinan become one of the top 10 disciples, but he did not have to be too hasty. His own strength was not enough. If he waited until he entered the Yuanying realm, then he would have a greater chance of success. He pondered for a while, picked up a brush, and wrote a letter to the Shoming Palace. Not long after, a letter came back. It was Immortal Peng's reply. He opened it, smiled, and put it aside. Everything had been settled. When he was about to return to the small pot mirror to cultivate, he felt some changes in the formation. He carefully examined it, and his expression changed slightly. He waved his sleeves to open the restrictive formation and let in a talisman. He received it and saw that it was a letter from the sect leader. He opened it in surprise and couldn't help but shake his head and sigh, "So it's about this matter. I still can't be idle." Previously, the sect leader had told him that within 30 years, he would receive a disciple to inherit the Jade Shade sect. Now, the time had come. Sect leader Qin had calculated that that person was in the Gong prefecture of the Great Wei state. Therefore, he only needed to receive that person as a disciple. However, the content of the sect leader's letter was a little strange. Not only did he only give him a deadline of 1 month, he also clearly stated that he could not take the initiative to ask for the sect leader's help, and that the sect leader must come to him on his own. If the sect leader did not come by then he would have missed the opportunity. Although Zhang Yan did not understand the deep meaning behind it, since the sect leader had passed down the decree, he had to go. He instructed the mirror spirit to guard the cave house. Then he got up and flew out of the cave house toward the southeast direction. After traveling for more than 10 days, he arrived at the Gong prefecture of the Wei state. There were many hills and mountainous areas here. The scenery was beautiful, and there were lakes of different sizes scattered like stars in the sky. He circled several times on top of the cloud, and after several calculations, he saw a village with crisscrossed paths. In order to avoid shocking the world, he descended the cloud in the middle of the mountain forest, walked out of the mountain path, and headed toward the village. Just now, when he entered the village, he heard the sound of dogs barking. He saw a group of dirty children throwing mud at each other, chasing and playing, and making a ruckus. The older ones were about 15 or 16 years old, and the younger ones were only 7 or 8 years old. Among them, there was a teenager with thick eyebrows and dark skin. He was wrestling with several strong and sturdy teenagers of similar age. The rest of the older children were shouting and jeering at the side. This dark-skinned teenager had some courage, but he couldn't fight against so many people. After a while, he was beaten to the ground, and his hands and feet were held down, and he was shouting and yelling. At this time, a young man wearing silk clothes came over, and he was only 13 or 14 years old. His skin was white, and there were 2 faint hairs at the corner of his mouth. There were 2 long attendants beside him, and he should be from a rich family in the countryside. He only heard him say, "Song San Air, the day before yesterday you used feces to dirty my new clothes. Today I'll beat you up to teach you a lesson." The dark-skinned teenager's face flushed red, but he was held down tightly and couldn't get up. The young man who looked like a young man learned from the adults, and after throwing down a few harsh words, he went away proudly. Zhang Yan stood in the distance, and his eyes patrolled among them. He only looked for a while, but he couldn't see any of them who had the foundation of cultivation. But if it was really so easy to find, the sect master probably wouldn't have set a time limit of 1 month. But this didn't stump him. After thinking for a while, he looked at the dark-skinned teenager sitting on the ground, and he had a plan. Zhang Yan walked up to him and said with a smile, "You young man, I see that you have a strong body. How can you be bullied like this?" The dark-skinned teenager suddenly saw an unfamiliar Taoist come over to talk to him and was a little stunned. But seeing that Zhang Yan was friendly, he wasn't afraid and argued, "Wang Sanlang and the others are shameless. With so many people against me, of course I can't beat them." Zhang Yan shook his head and said, "That's not necessarily true. Numbers don't mean anything. Have you ever heard of a fierce general who can take on 100, 1,000, or even 10,000 in battle?" The dark-skinned teenager had also heard of these strange legends and historical anecdotes from the down-and-out scholars in the countryside, and when he heard Zhang Yan talking about this, he immediately forgot about his pain and said, "I've heard of it, I've heard of it. Master Taoist can't defeat me, and I heard from the teachers in the village that one of the founding ministers of Wei, there's a man called Zhuagongcheng, who has the courage to take on 10,000 men." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "That's the courage to take on 10,000 men." Yes, cloth. The teenager scratched the back of his head and smiled embarrassedly. Zhang Yan saw that he was stupid and did not correct him and only smiled and said, "Then let me ask you, do you want to learn this technique?" The teenager was stunned, and then he jumped up and grabbed the corner of Zhang Yan's shirt and shook it and said urgently, "Master Taoist, teach me, Master Taoist, teach me." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Come closer." The dark-skinned teenager was anxious and quickly moved his head closer, but Zhang Yan did not mind and whispered a few incantations in his ear and then patted the back of the teenager's head and said, "Go." The teenager couldn't help but shiver and walked out of the field in a daze. Zhang Yan looked at his back and smiled, and then walked up the mountain with light steps. Halfway up the mountain, he found a dilapidated mountain god temple, sat on a praying mat, and waited patiently. When the dark-skinned teenager returned home, he couldn't help but think of the incantation that the Taoist said, and it was very strange. He had never read or learned to write, but Zhang Yan only said it once, and he remembered it in his heart. He couldn't forget it even if he wanted to, and he didn't need to understand it. The meaning was self-evident. He followed the incantation, and after a night, he jumped down from his bed and felt that his body was light and healthy, and his eyes and ears were sharp, and his body had endless strength. In his joy, he excitedly ran out to find the Wang family's young master, and when he passed by a pond, he saw 2 water buffaloes blocking his way. His heart was moved, and he ran up to them and pulled their horns. The water buffaloes mooed twice, and were dragged to the ground by him. This made him even more excited. After running for less than a mile, he saw Wang Sanlang leading a group of teenagers there, shooting birds with slingshots. He shouted, and without saying anything, he rushed forward and made a move. This time, he easily knocked over a dozen youths to the ground. Not a single one of them was his opponent, and Wang Sanlang was even pinned to the ground and given a good beating. But the strange thing was, even though he hit them hard, no one was injured, and there weren't even any scratches. It seemed like there was no enmity between these children playing around. Afterwards, Wang Sanlang asked, Song San, how did you learn all these skills in just one night? The dark-skinned teenager was honest and straightforward, and also had the temperament of a teenager, so he couldn't keep his mouth shut, and so he bragged about meeting Zhang Yan and teaching him. Wang Sanlang secretly noted it down, and ordered his follower to find the whereabouts of the Taoist from yesterday. Zhang Yan meditated in the mountain deity temple for 2 days, and on the 3rd day at noon, he suddenly heard footsteps coming from outside the door. He opened his eyes, and saw several servants in green robes and hats rushing in, all drenched in sweat, and panting non-stop. Behind them, another person walked in, and it was the young master that he saw the other day. When he came up the mountain, he was also panting with a red face. When Wang Sanlang saw Zhang Yan, his eyes lit up and came up to him and respectfully bowed, saying, "Greetings, Taoist." Then he waved his hand, and the attendant behind him brought out 2 plates. On one plate was a box of candied plums, and on the other plate were several copper coins wrapped in red silk, as well as 2 privately minted silver ingots. He stole a glance at Zhang Yan, and then bowed deeply, saying, "Please accept it, Taoist." Zhang Yan looked at them a few times, and smiled, saying, "You're here to ask for the Dharma." Wang Sanlang's face was full of surprise, and he nodded his head, saying, "Yes, yes." Zhang Yan nodded, "That's easy, come closer." Wang Sanlang hurriedly said, "Wait." He looked at Zhang Yan with a burning gaze and said, "Taoist priest, I would like to ask a question. I wonder if Taoist priest has a way to last for a long time, and not just for 2 or 3 days." The dark-skinned youth was excited for less than 2 days, but he found that the qi in his body had unknowingly leaked out, and he no longer felt as strong as he was a few days ago. After that, no matter how hard he tried, he could not remember the incantation from that day. Wang Sanlang's family had produced a high scholar, and he was much more knowledgeable than the dark-skinned youth. He thought that the Taoist would not pass down Tao techniques for no reason, so he must be asking for something. If there was a Dharma that lasted for a few days, could there be a Dharma that lasted for a few months? Or even a few years? Or even a few decades? The more he thought about it, the more excited he was. He secretly despised Song Sen, for not being knowledgeable, and missed out on a master, so he went to consult the master of his family. After that, he found out about Zhang Yan's whereabouts, and came looking for him. Zhang Yan responded with an "Oh," and said, "You're looking for a method that will not leak out qi." Yes, the qi will leak out in less than 2 days, then what's the use of it? Wang Sanlang nodded his head repeatedly, his expression excited. From the Taoist tone, it seemed that there was indeed such a method. Then would he still need to study in the future? With this ability, he could join the military, and after killing a few Hu generals, he might be able to ask for a wife and children, and bring honor to his ancestors. Zhang Yan thought for a while and said, "That's easy. Do you know the Earth Temple on the slope 10 miles away?" Wang Sanlang did not react and said, "Earth Temple?" The long attendant immediately came forward and said, "Young master, that's the Bat King Temple." Hearing the 3 words Bat King Temple, Wang Sanlang could not help but shiver. That Bat King Temple was originally a Earth Temple. In the first year of the current dynasty, it was said that a Taoist brought hundreds of virgin boys and girls there to cultivate, saying that he was suppressing some demonic aura. As a result, in one night, a foul wind blew, and everyone, including the Taoist, disappeared. Since then, no one dared to go there anymore. Even now, passers-by could faintly hear the sound of a zither in the middle of the night, and it was said that there was a female spirit that appeared eating and drinking human blood. Wang Sanlang was a little frightened, and said, "Why did Taoist mention this ghost temple?" Zhang Yan looked at them with a smile that was not a smile, and said, From today onwards, every night at midnight, whoever comes to see me in this Bat King temple, I will impart that method to that person. Chapter 421. The mournful wailing in the Bat King temple suddenly disappeared the moment Zhang Yan stepped into the temple. The huge Dan Sha on his body was constantly circulating and protecting his body. He did not need to use it deliberately. Even if a little of it leaked outside, it was enough to suppress the yin qi in the temple. There were more than 10 beasts in the temple that looked like cats and beavers with tiger stripes on their bodies. They were lying on the ground and looked at him in fear. They were trembling all over. Zhang Yan did not care about them. He looked around coldly and his eyes emitted a foot-long white light that looked like a sharp sword aura. The temple should have been abandoned for 100 years, but there was no dust or cobwebs around it. Instead, it seemed like someone often swept it. He knew that it was the beasts' doing. This must be their daily residence, which was why they took care of it. The temple was not small. It was divided into a front and a back hall. He walked to the back hall and looked up. He saw a statue of the earth god standing on the altar. Although it looked kind, it had protruding lips and ears. Its sharp teeth were exposed. It had red eyes and black skin. There was white hair on its cheeks. It did not look like a human. Zhang Yan thought to himself. Since the temple was named after the Bat King, it should be a bat spirit that cultivated into a demon and was later worshipped by the local villagers as the earth god. This was not unusual. For example, in a remote rural area, if the spirits were willing to protect the safety of the people and prevent them from being harmed by evil spirits, not only would they be able to cultivate well, they would also be able to enjoy incense and blood. Even the Taoist priests of Taoism Palace would not come looking for trouble. However, after looking at it a few more times, he could see that something was wrong. With a wave of his hand, he peeled off the layer of dry mud on the statue. The dark wood grain underneath was revealed. There was a light yellow talisman pasted on it. He laughed coldly and said, "There is no formation here. I was wondering why the yin qi was so stagnant. So the root cause is here." The statue of the earth god temple was only covered with a layer of mud on the outside and painted with a layer of paint. The inside was carved with a yin wood that had been refined by magic. It was unknown what kind of secret technique was used to make this wooden statue. Originally, it could be used to ward off evil, but now, it was hiding yin within yin. Their souls would be sucked in and imprisoned within to be refined with yin qi. Over time, it would become a place to raise devils. If he didn't care about it and didn't care about it, a demon would definitely be born in 100 years. Such a method. With one look, he knew that the disciples of the devil sect lacked devil heads to refine their evil arts, so they took a different path and nurtured devil heads. Now that the devil tribulation had started, there were countless devil heads in the devil's cave. It was so that there was no need to resort to such methods. This was probably the reason why the temple was abandoned here. Over the past hundreds of years, it was unknown how many spirits had been imprisoned and refined within the wooden statue. Just like at this moment, there were more than 10 newly captured spirits that were suffering from the pain of soul refinement. Originally, he was in great pain, but with Zhang Yan in front of him, he was unable to make a sound due to the immense pressure from his body. Zhang Yan pondered for a moment. Although this place was already abandoned, it was inevitable for a living person to be in a trance when they were tainted by the yin qi. Strange phenomena appeared frequently in front of him, and as time went on, it would hurt his vitality. Since he had seen it, he couldn't let it go on like this. He pointed his finger at the talisman. With a soft sound, the spell was broken. The wooden statue trembled a few times and couldn't restrain the spirits anymore. The 10 spirits came down from the statue and bowed to Zhang Yan a few times before dispersing. Zhang Yan didn't care about them. He flicked his sleeves and a streak of purple lightning flew out. It circled around the wooden statue and swept away the yin qi that had been accumulated for hundreds of years. After doing this, he was about to find a place to meditate. The dozen strange beasts had been watching his movements. At this time, a strange beast with a short nose and bright fur folded its ears back. It called out a few times and came over with a clean praying mat in its mouth. It stood up and bowed to him like a human. Zhang Yan nodded his head and said, "You guys are sensible." He pondered for a moment and took out a pill. "I've destroyed your hiding place, so I'll give you this form transformation pill." The strange beast seemed to be pleasantly surprised and used its mouth to bring it over. After bowing to Zhang Yan a few times, it went to the side and called out a few times before leading the group of strange beasts out of the temple. In an instant, they disappeared without a trace. Zhang Yan sat down on the praying mat and closed his eyes, waiting for the fated person to come to him. When he was talking to Wang Sanlang, he did not deliberately avoid the manservants. Even though Wang Sanlang specifically told him not to tell anyone, the news of the Celestial Master's teachings still spread like wildfire, causing an uproar. Although there were many people who were moved when they heard that they were going to the Bat King temple. However, he flinched and shrank back. However, there were still some fearless people who dared to take the risk and come here. But the strange thing was, when the villagers woke up the next day, they found themselves lying in their own beds. They couldn't remember what happened yesterday, but their bodies were much stronger than before. Once this news spread out, it attracted even more people to head over there. More than 20 miles away from the Bat King temple, there was a place called Wei Village. At the west of the village was a thatched hut that was leaking wind everywhere. Inside the hut, a child was holding a small piece of neatly cut cotton cloth and was carefully wiping the saliva hanging on the corner of his sick mother's mouth. He said softly, "Mother, rest in peace. I'm going to accompany Tong Si's young master to study." The old woman's eyelids moved as a response. This child was called Wei Zihong. His father was recruited to dig a canal a few years ago. In the end, he contracted an illness and died, leaving only an orphan and a widow at home. He was still young, and the Wei family was paralyzed. They could only rely on the help of their neighbors and relatives to survive, so their family was very poor. When he heard that there was a celestial master who had a way to make people strong enough to fight 100 people, he made up his mind to take him as a disciple. He didn't think too much about it. He just wanted to have a body full of strength and earn some money to cure his mother's illness. He wouldn't have to worry about food and clothing anymore. Wei Village was more than 20 miles away from the Bat King temple. It wasn't much for the villagers, but for a child like him, it was extremely difficult. If he went alone, not to mention human traffickers and bandits, even wild wolves could take him away. Although he was only 7 or 8 years old, he had the experience of an adult. A few days ago, he had made an agreement with a traveling merchant he was familiar with to set off together when this person was selling goods. At this time, the sky was slightly white. He was afraid that he would miss the time, so he decided to go earlier. He first carried half a dry biscuit with him, then went to the neighbor's house to get some boiled water. He poured it into the gourd and tightly stuffed it. Then he found a few rags and stuffed some hay inside. Finally, he used hemp rope to tie his calf. He stomped a few times, and seeing that it wouldn't fall, he went out the door and found the traveling merchant. He was also sensible and tactful. Although he was small, he still helped the merchant carry a basket. For hours later, they arrived at the town. From here to the Bat King temple was about 5 miles away, and it wasn't even midnight yet. He asked for a small piece of realgar from the traveling merchant, and after bidding farewell, he went into the forest alone. After walking for a short while, he saw a big tree and climbed up to find a thick tree trunk with dense leaves. He leaned on it and rested. It was also because he was tired from walking. After a while, he fell asleep. After sleeping for an unknown period of time, he suddenly felt some movement. When he opened his eyes to take a look, he saw a little white-furred monkey was opening its big round eyes and continuously pushing him. Wei Zihong turned over and touched his head. "Little monkey, is this your place?" He looked up and saw that the sky was already dark. He slapped his head and shouted, oh no, I don't want to miss the time to become apprentices." He looked around. At this time, the night was dark, and he was in the wilderness. He couldn't see his fingers in front of him, and it was hard to identify the path ahead. However, he had a skill, and that was being able to see things in the dark. This was also the reason why he had the confidence to come and become apprentices. At this time, he faintly saw a light coming from a boundary in front of him. Looking at the direction, It happened to be the direction of the Bat King temple. He hurriedly climbed down from the tree and ran towards the light. That little white monkey suddenly jumped up and landed on his shoulder. Wei Zihong's footsteps paused, and he asked curiously, "Little monkey, are you also going to become apprentices?" The little white monkey squeaked a few times and kept nodding. Wei Zihong saw that it was quite intelligent, and he felt a little happy. He touched its fur and felt that it was quite soft and smooth. He said, "Then let's go together." The little white monkey squeaked a few more times, and Wei Zihong laughed a few times. He then let it climb on his body and ran forward. He often heard that this place was haunted, and even though he mustered up his courage to come, he couldn't help but feel nervous. Maybe it was because of his good luck. Nothing strange happened in this boundary that was rumored to be extremely dangerous in the past. He actually arrived in front of the Bat King temple safely. It was just that there was still light in the distance, but when he got closer, it was pitch black, and not a single sound could be heard. Wei Zihong was after all a child, and he felt a little afraid in his heart. His footsteps slowed down a lot, but when he thought of his old mother who was paralyzed in bed, he instantly became determined again. He walked forward, and with a squeak, he pushed open the old door of the temple. He stuck his head out and stepped in. Seeing that there was no movement, he became more courageous and carefully walked in. After about 20 steps, he turned around a layer of cloth and saw a young Taoist who was meditating with his eyes closed sitting there. He couldn't help but widen his eyes, and then he came to his senses. He hurriedly knelt on the ground and said with a crisp child's voice, "Little kid Wei Zihong, I'm looking for Taoists to become apprentices." When he finished, he repeatedly kowtowed. Zhang Yan opened his eyes and looked at the child. He saw that there was a fringe in front of his forehead, and his body was frail and his skin was fair. He looked thin and small, as if he would be blown away by the wind, but his eyes were lively, and his physique was even more extraordinary. He thought to himself, could it be this child? These days, there were more than 10 people who came to him to become apprentices, but they were not the person he was looking for, and their physique was too poor, so they couldn't learn Dao techniques. He gave them a few pointers on ways to strengthen their bodies, and then sent them back. He said gently, "Since you're here to become apprentices, then come up." Wei Zihong followed his words and walked forward. When he stood still, Zhang Yan stretched out his hand, as if he was going to lift up the fringe in front of his forehead. Wei Zihong instantly panicked, and covered his forehead with both hands, saying, "Taoist, you can't." Zhang Yan put down his hand and smiled, "Why not?" Wei Zihong still used both hands to cover his forehead, and replied seriously, "Taoist, there's something strange here. If others see it, they will immediately faint." Chapter 422. Hearing Wei Zihong's words, Zhang Yan smiled and didn't force him. With his eyesight, he didn't need to lift his eyes to see that there was a mark on Wei Zihong's forehead that looked like a closed eye. It was similar to the 3 eyes that sect leader Qin mentioned. He was sure that this person was the person he was looking for. He looked at the white monkey on Wei Zihong's shoulder. If it wasn't for this spiritual beast that blocked the beasts in the forest, it wouldn't have been so easy to reach this place. This little monkey had good intentions, but it ruined his plan. Zhang Yan shook his head. This was an unintentional act, so he didn't want to dwell on it. He flicked his finger and a medicinal pill flew out, landing in front of the white monkey. Unexpectedly, the white monkey squeaked and shook its head, but it didn't want to let go of Wei Zihong's clothes. Zhang Yan couldn't help but laugh. "You animal, you're quite clever." This little white monkey was a spiritual beast in the forest, and it could tell that Zhang Yan was here to accept a disciple. Although it had gained intelligence, it didn't have the bloodline of a great monster. Without guidance, it would be hard to pass the stage of transformation. Although the medicinal pill was good, how could it compare to following Wei Zihong and finding a better way out? Zhang Yan didn't pay attention to it anymore, and only said to Wei Zihong, "Since you're here, and you're sincere in wanting to be my disciple, I can see that you have a good physique. Are you willing to follow me back to the mountain to cultivate?" Wei Zihong was startled, but he lowered his head and said, "Taoist, I can't go with you." Zhang Yan asked in a pleasant tone, "Is there something that's troubling you?" Wei Zihong hesitated for a moment, then he gathered his courage and answered loudly, "My mother is sick in bed. If I leave, there's no one to take care of her." Zhang Yan nodded and said, "We cultivators don't cut off our emotions. You have a respected mother, so you should take good care of her. I have 2 ways for you to choose. First, I'll teach you a spell. Once you've learned it, you'll be immune to all diseases. I have boundless strength and can fight against 10,000 people. It's not difficult to fight against a duke or marquis for 10,000 generations. Second, I'll bring you and Lao Mu back to the monastery. It's just that it's lonely in the mountains. Cultivating the Tao is simple and hard, eating wind and drinking dew. Sleeping rock and crouching ice are just common things. You can choose between these 2 methods." If it was a person who wholeheartedly pursued the Tao, then he would naturally choose the second option without any hesitation. However, if a person who had the heart for riches and honor coveted that lifetime of glory, splendor, wealth, and rank, then he would choose the first option. He was sent to guard this place under the orders of his master. This was also a hard job. Within a radius of tens of thousands of miles, all the restrictions and formations set up by his master were under his watch. Just now, he suddenly noticed that a talisman passed down by his master had dimmed. But looking at its layout, he didn't know how many years it had been since it was set up, and it didn't have much use at all. But according to the rules of the sect, even if the layout had been abandoned for a long time, he couldn't ignore it. He cursed for a while. Although he was extremely unwilling, he could only crush the talisman in his hand. He closed his eyes and sensed for a moment. Once he knew the location, he flicked his sleeve and summoned a wisp of green smoke. In an instant, he flew up and rushed toward that place. This green smoke was given to him by his master. It was a flying treasure that made it convenient for him to come and go. Even if it was 1,000 miles away, he would be able to reach it in an instant. But along the way, he was leisurely and deliberately walked very slowly. If the person who destroyed the restriction had already left, he would only need to take a look and then return. He didn't want to be involved at all. In a flash, he was 100 miles away from the Bat King Temple. The leisurely expression on his face disappeared and became a little more serious. He used a few spells and hid his body. Just now, he dared to go forward. Now, although many of the disciples of the demon faction acted unscrupulously, and although he knew that there were no experts among the mortals, he was still extremely careful and didn't dare to underestimate the person who came. He hid in the clouds and looked down. The aura below was extremely shocking. It was vast and majestic, and it faintly shot up to the sky. Who knew how much higher than his cultivation level was? He was shocked and thought to himself, so dangerous, so dangerous. If he just now rashly came out, wouldn't he be right under this person's blade? After looking a few more times, the fear in his eyes became even stronger. Although he had a flying treasure with him, the person in the temple below was at least at the core transformation realm, so he immediately wanted to leave. Just as he was turning his head around, he unintentionally caught a glimpse of a child walking swiftly towards him. Even though he was carrying a person on his back, he was still able to walk as if he was flying, which inevitably attracted his attention. After a few glances, his heart was moved and he said, "This kind of bone structure, it's quite good." He looked a few more times and suddenly his body trembled. He said, "Could it be?" For a moment he couldn't care about anything else and rushed forward. A ray of light fell down and swept the child up. Wei Zihong was walking forward with light steps. Seeing the Bat King Temple in the distance, he suddenly felt his body become light. He was pulled up to the top of the clouds, and his mother and the little white monkey fell to the ground. He couldn't help but feel anxious and exclaimed. He looked up and saw a strange Taoist sitting in front of him. The Taoist was staring at him with his eyes wide open. Because he didn't look like a good person, Wei Zihong said cautiously, "Who are you? Why did you catch me? Quickly let me down." The black-robed Taoist snorted and stretched out his hand to lift the fringe on Wei Zihong's forehead. When he saw a closed-eye scar, he instantly revealed an expression of ecstasy and almost danced with joy. He said repeatedly, "It really is you, it really is you." Then he smiled proudly and said, Just follow me. This time I've picked up a treasure. Although he was secretly delighted, he was afraid of Zhang Yan at the side, so he didn't want to say much and was about to sweep Wei Zihong away. At this moment, he heard a loud sound behind him. When he looked back, he saw a pale baleful qi overturning the roof of the Bat King temple. A sword pellet flew out from the qi and turned into a flash of light. It was as fast as lightning and slashed towards him. Flying sword. The black-robed Taoist was instantly scared out of his wits. He was actually a sword cultivator. Could he be from Shaoqing? If that was the case, even if he had a flying treasure, it would be hard for him to escape. How would he dare to stay for a moment longer? He immediately turned around and wanted to escape. At this moment, Wei Zihong also noticed that something was wrong. He panicked and his qi and blood surged up. He felt a pain on his forehead and the eye scar on it suddenly opened, releasing a sharp light that shone right on the black-robed Taoist's face. The black-robed Taoist's entire attention was on the flying sword, so he didn't expect such a change. He was caught off guard and screamed. He covered his eyes, and blood flowed out from the gaps between his fingers like a fountain. With this delay, a sword light attacked and slashed through his neck. In an instant, his head was chopped off and his corpse fell to the ground. Once the black-robed Taoist died, Wei Zihong also fell from the sky. At this moment, a cloud of smoke flew over and wrapped around him. In the blink of an eye, he was on top of the cloud. Zhang Yan lowered his head to take a look, and then he placed his hand on her wrist. He knew that she was fine, so he nodded and flicked his sleeve to bring Madame Wei and the little white monkey up. After he determined the direction, he rode a cloud and flew away. At this moment, Wei Zihong also had a splitting headache and felt weak all over. He felt that all the strength that Zhang Yan had given him just now was gone in an instant. Usually, when he opened the strange eye on his forehead, he would feel dizzy and had to stay in bed for a few days. Only now was he able to recover. Forcefully using the strange eye to look at people just now had consumed a lot of his qi. After a while, he fell into a deep sleep. After sleeping for an unknown period of time, when he woke up, he found that he was in midair. He touched his body left and right, and out of curiosity, he carefully looked down. Seeing this, Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Disciple, you're awake. Once you pass the mountain in front, you'll be able to return to the sect." However, at this moment, his eyes narrowed. Suddenly, he saw a Taoist who looked like a cool breeze and bright moon standing in the cloud. The Taoist bowed to him and said in a loud voice, "Junior brother Zhang, you're back. I've been waiting for you for a long time." Zhang Yan took a look and saw that it was Luo Qingyu, one of the top 10 disciples like him. He calmly stepped forward and bowed to him, saying, "I wonder why senior brother Luo has been waiting for me here?" Luo Qingyu snorted and said lightly, "I heard that junior brother Zhang has been practicing Dao techniques for the past few years and has made great progress. I also have some insights and would like to ask you for advice." To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 423. Zhang Yan and Luo Qingyu rarely interacted, but now that the latter had suddenly come to him to ask for advice, he knew that there must be a reason behind it. For Luo Qingyu to come here personally, the identity of the person behind this was obvious. He could not help but speculate that this might be because sect leader Qin had allowed him to borrow the floating heavenly palace, which had provoked the Zhenren to attack him. Although Luo Qingyu had said that it was a spar, he could already imagine that if he was defeated by this person, Luo Qingyu's master would definitely complain to the sect leader that he was not qualified to cultivate in the floating heavenly palace. As for avoiding the battle, it was not a good choice. Luo Qingyu was blocking his way to the clear Serenity Heavenly Lake. If he took a detour, it would be fine, but if he did so, it would be a show of weakness. Not only would it damage his own reputation, but it would also make the masters in the sect look down on him. The person behind this would then have more reason to make things difficult for him and ruin his plans. Since the other party had already made his move, he could only react accordingly, and there was no reason for him to back down. Zhang Yan quietly raised his hand and brushed it over Wei Zihong's head. A gust of clear air covered the scar on his eye. Then he gave a gentle push, and a cloud separated and pushed Wei Zihong away. He said, "My disciple, I have some matters to attend to. Take your mother and wait at the side." Wei Zihong was wrapped up by the cloud, and in an instant he was hundreds of feet away. Luo Qingyu casually glanced at him and said, "This child has a good physique. Is he your new disciple, junior apprentice brother?" Zhang Yan smiled faintly and said, "This time I went to the mortal world, I did not expect to find a good disciple, it is also my good luck." Putting aside the eye on Wei Zihong's forehead, there were many people with the same level of talent as him in the 9 cities and continents. Hence, Luo Qingyu only glanced at him once before turning his attention to Zhang Yan. He said seriously, "It's a pity that I didn't fight with junior brother Zhang during the competition that day, but you and I are from the same sect. If we were to fight, it would hurt our friendship. How about this? I have a Qingping Han Yen formation diagram that I have refined for many years. I originally wanted to show its power in the sword competition of the 16 sects and meet the masters of the various sections. Now, I would like to ask junior brother Zhang to give me some pointers first." Zhang Yan's expression did not change. He cupped his hands and said, "I was just about to experience senior brother's brilliance." Luo Qingyu nodded his head. He gave a clear shout and conjured a spell. He then placed an array diagram beneath his feet and placed it between the two of them. The diagram expanded for a few miles in an instant, covering both the heavens and the earth. Then, it suddenly shook and activated its spiritual vigor. It released countless clear lights and auspicious qi and played a strange melody. The melody was beautiful and elegant, like a clear spring that flowed into one's heart. Zhang Yan looked at it attentively and saw that it was like an unfolding picture scroll. The mountains and rivers were connected, the heavens and the earth were clean, and the sky was clear. Although he could only see a corner of it, he could see that it was full of mysteries. Luo Qingyu raised his eyebrows and stretched out his hand to lead the way. He said loudly, "Junior brother Zhang, please." It was also because they were from the same sect that he politely invited Zhang Yan to enter the formation. If he were to fight with an enemy, he only needed to use the formation during the battle. If the opponent was unprepared, he would not be able to avoid it and would be dragged into the formation in an instant. Zhang Yan smiled slightly, waved his sleeves and entered the formation. The details of the formation were unknown. If he entered it rashly, he would not be able to break the formation without breaking the spell. If he were to be trapped in it, although it would not be serious, it would be a great humiliation. However, he had something to rely on, so he was not afraid. Luo Qingyu saw that he entered the formation without hesitation. He also secretly praised him and said, "Junior brother Zhang's temperament is really a good seed of cultivation." He came here under the order of his master to fight with Zhang Yan. But before he came here, Zhenren Yan had secretly instructed him not to overdo it. He just needed to put on a show and it would be fine if he won or lost. He secretly tried to figure out his master's intention. He always did not want to offend Zhenren Peng, who was behind Zhang Yan. Therefore, after thinking about it, he decided to meet him with the formation diagram. As soon as Zhang Yan entered the formation, he saw that the scene in front of him had changed. As far as the eye could see, there was a stretch of mountains, overlapping and disorderly, which seemed to be endless. The mountains were arranged in a mysterious formation. On top of each mountain, there was a flag. When the flag was waved, thousands of layers of green smoke and thousands of miles of thunderclouds were roaring and rolling. The dust covered the sun. Seeing that a stranger came in, the green wind suddenly swept over. With a command in his heart, Zhang Yan released a meter-long protective treasure light to block the wind. However, the green wind was like a sharp blade that sliced off a layer in the blink of an eye, and he was slightly shocked when he saw how sharp it was. At this time, Luo Qingyu also entered the formation map. He peeked out from the high green wind and said in a clear voice, "Junior brother Zhang, in this formation, I am practicing the Qingji wind and thunder ritual. I know that you have the purple heaven thunder. Today, let's see which is more powerful, the thunder that I have cultivated or the purple heaven thunder that you have cultivated." This wind and thunder ritual method required one of the 5 skills, Green Spirit Manifestation Method. With the help of the array peak, it could grow and multiply without interruption. The array peaks in the formation diagram were not illusions, but were refined by Luo Qingyu by collecting the essence of heaven and earth and the 10,000-year-old primordial tree. In the past hundreds of years, he had only refined 36 of them. Once they were activated, they could resonate with his own cultivation method and cause wind and thunder to hurt the enemy. Just now, when he mentioned that he wanted to use this formation during the sword duel between the 16 sects, it was not empty words. He did have such a plan in mind. However, the Qingping Mist formation had not been refined to perfection, it was only roughly done. If there were 360 array peaks in this formation, its power would be enhanced to an unbelievable level, and it would not be a problem for it to fight 100 people. Zhang Yan laughed and replied, "Since senior brother Luo is interested, I will definitely keep you company." He stretched out his finger and in an instant, there was a thunderous sound. A purple light flashed, like a dancing snake, it tore through the sky and rushed towards Luo Qingyu. Luo Qingyu shouted and hurriedly activated his Dharma formula. The 36 banners fluttered and a stream of clear qi gathered on each of the banners and coiled around each other. In an instant, the wind and clouds converged, thunder and lightning intertwined and turned into streaks of clear qi that fell from the sky and collided with the purple lightning. In an instant, there was a deafening sound that shook the mountains in the formation. However, the purple heaven thunder was extremely powerful. It was indeed the second most powerful skill in Qinsong school. Even though Zhang Yan had only cultivated it to the initial level and was not very familiar with it, it was still extremely overbearing. Just now, when the green lightning met it, it collapsed. Luo Qingyu was slightly shocked and thought to himself, "Junior brother Zhang has not condensed his true seal yet, but the power of the purple heaven thunder is already so powerful. If he breaks through to core transformation stage 3, won't it be even more difficult to deal with? No wonder Master and Jinren Zhu wanted me to come here now." He smiled faintly and continued to activate the green lightning. On the surface, it seemed that Zhang Yan had the upper hand. However, the Qingji wind thunder was performed with the help of the formation map and Zhang Yan did not expend much of his energy. If he could not find a way to break the formation under the endless thunder technique, even if Zhang Yan's core was of the first grade and he had a lot of energy, he would not be able to withstand such a great loss. Luo Qingyu was confident that as long as he practiced patiently, he would be able to win after a long time. Zhang Yan propped up the protective light on his treasured robe and released rays of light to resist the wind and thunder. He slowly looked around and saw clearly that the wind and thunder that Luo Qingyu had cast were all borrowed from the flags on the peaks. If he could remove them one by one, then the formation map would not have much power. After coming up with a countermeasure, he immediately raised his sword and turned into a ray of light. He cut through the air and cut through the qi. In an instant he arrived at the top of one of the peaks. He circled in the sky and saw that there was a ball of wind and thunder protecting it. It was not something that could be broken by ordinary means. He then pointed his finger downwards and a ray of lightning shot down. With a loud bang, the flag was destroyed. Then, the sword ray turned and flew downwards. In just a moment, he had destroyed more than 10 flags. Luo Qingyu hid in the green wind and looked indifferent. He looked at Zhang Yan but did not stop him. If he wanted to break the formation, he would have to remove the flags one by one. However, the formation map was not ordinary. Not only was there a formation within a formation, there was also a magical weapon that was used to suppress it. This weapon was called the Kuan Ding Pearl. Although it could not hurt the enemy, it could suppress the qi of the enemy and create a formation on its own. Every time a formation was broken, another one would appear behind it. Unless the person who broke the formation could destroy all the formations in one go, there was no way he could break the formation. If he did it step by step, he would die of exhaustion sooner or later. Zhang Yanlian's flight was swift, and after another moment, she had broken through the 36 peaks. However, at this moment, Luo Qingyu started to cast a spell. In the blink of an eye, another 36 flags appeared on top of the peaks, just like before. He smiled and put his hands behind his back. He said, "Junior brother Zhang, don't waste your energy. Let me give you a piece of advice. If you promise not to go to the floating heavenly palace to cultivate, I will open the formation door and let you out. I guarantee that no one else will know about what happened today. What do you think?" He waited for a while and heard a voice reply from within the lightning. "Senior brother Luo, you have underestimated me. Just now, I am just trying to prove what I have in mind. This is just a simple formation map. How hard can it be to break it?" Luo Qingyu shook his head. He thought that Zhang Yan was just being stubborn. However, since Zhang Yan refused to agree to his terms, there was no reason for him to give up. Luo Qingyu's expression turned cold. He continuously cast a spell to summon the wind and thunder. He thought to himself, "When junior brother Zhang is exhausted, I will bring this formation map and place it on Jichuan Peak. After 10 days or half a month, I will let junior brother Zhang out. Let's see if he still has the face to go to the floating heavenly palace to cultivate." This formation map was a world of its own. It could easily trap a person for a few years. If Zhang Yan was trapped in it, although Luo Qingyu would not hurt him, once the news got out, how would he have the face to go to the floating heavenly palace again? Just when Luo Qingyu thought that victory was in his grasp, he saw dozens of red lights flying out from below. These things were of different sizes. Some were as small as a rice grain, while some were as big as a fish's eye. They looked familiar. When he realized what they were, he was shocked and shouted, "Red Thunder Bead! Oh no!" He wanted to keep the formation map, but it was too late. He heard a loud rumbling sound as if the sky and earth were collapsing. The scene in front of him changed, and he was already outside the formation. Zhang Yan was standing not far away. He bowed to him and said, "Senior brother Luo, thank you for letting me win." Having said that, he waved his sleeves and brought Wei Zihong and his son over. He then floated away. Luo Qingyu stared at him as he left. He then looked at the formation map in his hand that was missing a corner. He could not help but shake his head and smile bitterly. Chapter 424. After Zhang Yan got rid of Luo Qingyu, he continued to move forward. But before long, he saw another person blocking his way. This person had a strange appearance. He had 4 pupils in his eyes, a straight nose, and a square mouth. He wore a primeval crown with 2 wide sleeves. He stood on a thick cloud and his expression was indifferent. He was one of the top 10 disciples, Zhuang Bufan. Seeing this person, Zhang Yan raised his eyebrows. He was not surprised. If Luo Qingyu could find an excuse to fight with him, then it was no surprise that Zhuang Bufan was here. He sneered and said, "Senior brother Zhuang, are you here to test me?" Zhuang Bufan said coldly, "I didn't expect junior brother Zhang to be able to pass junior brother Luo's test. You're quite capable. There is no need to say more. If you can pass my divine ability, I will turn around and leave. In the future, the floating heavenly palace will belong to you." As soon as he finished speaking, he didn't wait for Zhang Yan to reply. He stretched out his right sleeve and a yellow gas flew out from his sleeve. After it came out, it suddenly dispersed. In an instant, dust and sand were kicked up, the weather changed, and yellow smoke rolled up. Zhang Yan reacted quickly. Before the yellow smoke could reach him, the flying sword turned into a ray of light and flew out to protect him. However, when he was in the cloud, he found that the yellow smoke seemed to have covered the entire sky. He could not escape. Zhuang Bufan waved his sleeve and the yellow smoke rushed down. As soon as it touched his body, Zhang Yan felt an irresistible force grabbing him. His head felt heavy and his feet felt light. He was flipped upside down and his body was thrown into the sleeve involuntarily. Seeing that he was going to be trapped in the sleeve, he did not want to sit still and wait for his death. He quickly performed the incantation and shook his hand. A thunderous sound could be heard. Like a thunderclap on a dry day, a bolt of purple cloud divine thunder split the sky and landed on the thick cloud of yellow smoke. As expected, this divine ability had unparalleled might. With just a single strike, it scattered it. However, Zhuang Bufan seemed to have expected this. He sneered and immediately withdrew his right sleeve. Then he waved his left sleeve. His sleeve shook in the wind and a drop of ink fell into water. They surged outwards without end, growing larger and larger. In the blink of an eye, they spread out for several li, like a curtain of dark clouds that covered the sky and covered the sun. When this Daluo heavenly sleeve was cultivated to the extreme, it could absorb 9 mountains, grasping the 4 seas, moving the stars and shifting the moon. The previous attack was only to restrain Zhang Yan, preventing him from successfully escaping. This time he truly made his move. As the cage came down, it immediately blocked all paths up and down. Zhang Yan was unable to escape and was instantly trapped in the circle. Seeing this, Zhang Yan sent out several bolts of purple heaven divine thunder in an attempt to shake it away, but even though the thunder rumbled, the rumbling resounded without end, yet it was like a stone that sank into the ocean and didn't give rise to any ripples. In but a short moment, his entire body was swept up by the muddy qi that covered the heavens and the earth, and he vanished into his sleeve. Zhuang Bufan remained expressionless. With a wave of his sleeves, he placed one hand behind his back and stepped onto the cloud, soaring into the sky. Even though Zhang Yan was trapped in his sleeve, his mind was still clear. He opened his eyes and looked around, only to find that he had fallen into a hazy world. Countless surging muddy qi wrapped around him like a cocoon, and even the spiritual energy in his body seemed to have been restrained. As he circulated his spiritual energy, he felt that it was difficult to control. If it was anyone else who fell into this state, they would have been at their wits' end. However, Zhang Yan had cultivated many divine arts, so it wasn't impossible for him to do so. He sneered coldly as a wisp of bright light erupted from his eyes. He circulated his profound art, and a strand of green and misty brilliance charged out from behind him. This strand of brilliance resisted the yellow smoke, and boundless vitality bloomed from within it. This vitality was like the awakening of all living things in spring, and it sprouted and flourished as it slowly pushed the yellow smoke outwards. When it was just about to be broken, he let out a thunderous shout and abruptly pushed outwards. A loud rumble resounded as he actually broke through the yellow smoke and broke free from it. After Zhuang Bufan put Zhang Yan away, he flew across the clouds and headed towards the gate. Suddenly, his arm shook and he was caught off guard, causing him to stumble on the cloud. Looking up, he saw Zhang Yan standing hundreds of feet away. Zhang Yan cupped his fists at him and said, "Senior brother Zhuang, thank you for sending me off. Goodbye." When he finished, he raised his sword and flew away with Madame Wei and her son. In an instant, they disappeared into the horizon. Zhuang Bufan wore a cold expression as he watched Huang Xiaolong disappear into the distance. There was nothing he could do. He snorted and turned around to leave. When Zhang Yan returned this time, no one stopped him anymore. Light soared into the sky, flying swiftly like a bolt of lightning as he smoothly arrived at clear nether heavenly lake. Before arriving at the cave residence, he dispersed the escape light on his body and first ordered Wei Zihong to take 2 pills to resist the cold air in the heavenly lake residence of bright nether heaven. After they dissolved the medicinal power, he rolled up his sleeves and brought the 2 of them to the main residence. After entering the 12 palaces, Zhang Yan sat down on the jade couch and called Wei Zihong over. He took out a bottle of pills and said, "Your mother has been bedridden for many years. This bottle of pills is called Qi Replenishing Powder. It can clear the blood in your body, relax the meridians, and get rid of impurities. Remember to give your mother one every morning and night. After 100 days, she will be able to walk like a normal person." Wei Zihong was pleasantly surprised. He knelt on the ground with tears of gratitude and said, "Master's kindness is something this disciple can't repay even if I die 10,000 times." Others didn't know where Wei Zihong's mother's paralysis came from, but Zhang Yan knew very well that Madame Wei must have been injured by the divine light from the 3 eyes on her forehead. However, with his medicinal pills to recuperate and protect her life, she wouldn't have to worry about it in the future. He then reminded, "Master will first pass on a technique to you. Once you've memorized it, go back and cultivate." Wei Zihong knelt down and kowtowed, saying yes. Zhang Yan flicked his finger and sent out a talisman. In just a moment, Lu Yenyi arrived at the hall. She bowed and said, Honored master has summoned this disciple. May I know what instructions you have for me? Zhang Yan pointed at Lu Yenny and said to Wei Zihong, this is your senior apprentice sister. If there is anything you don't understand in your cultivation, you can ask her. Wei Zihong hurriedly bowed respectfully to Lu Yenny and said loudly, Zihong greets senior apprentice sister. Lu Yenny helped him up and said gently, Junior apprentice brother, please rise. There are 5 senior apprentice sisters above you, so I will call you 6th junior apprentice brother. To be able to become a disciple of master is your good fortune. Cultivate well in the future and don't let down master's expectations. When Wei Zihong first entered the sect, he could only say yes in front of his senior apprentice sister. Lu Yenny saw that he was being reserved, so she smiled and didn't say anything else. Zhang Yan nodded. There were only a few disciples in the sect now. If he had the time, he would give a few pointers, but as his cultivation gradually increased, the number of disciples would increase as well. He wouldn't have to do everything himself. He would only let the disciples with higher cultivation in the sect do it for him. Now that he was the lower house chancellor, if he met a suitable disciple, he could send them to the lower house to cultivate. If they were really outstanding, they would definitely stand out from the crowd and it wouldn't be too late to teach them the true method. However, Wei Zihong was an exception. He was the one who would take over the Yao Yin clan's orthodoxy in the future, so there was no need to follow this path. After he opened his meridians, Zhang Yan would bring him to see the sect master and receive the 5 inherited treasures. Only then could he make specific arrangements for his cultivation. Zhang Yan gave some more instructions before ordering Shang Chong to bring Wei Zihong and his mother away and arrange a place for them to rest. He left Lu Yenny alone and said, I don't want to go to the competition in 5 years. If senior apprentice brother Hua sends someone to ask, just say that I'm in closed-door meditation to comprehend magic. I'll be in closed-door meditation for a long time, so you need to guard the house and don't go out at will. Yenny, as the eldest disciple, you'll be in charge of everything in the house. If you can't make up your mind, you can discuss it with Luo Nyangzi. If necessary, you can ask Jinren Lu for help. Lu Yenny said solemnly, yes, I'll remember. After Zhang Yan gave his instructions, he ordered her to leave. He then picked up his brush and wrote 3 letters to Shouming Palace, Danding Courtyard, and the lower house of Kangwu Mountain. Now that the matters of the lower house had his new rules and the 3 deacons were in charge, there should be nothing to worry about. Moreover, he knew that he would spend a lot of time in closed-door meditation this time, so he needed to inform Jinren Peng and Zhou Chongju in advance. After dealing with a few matters, he was thinking about what he had missed out. Suddenly, a matter came to his mind and he could not help but shake his head. He thought to himself, I almost forgot about this matter, but I need to inform them. When he opened his meridians that day, although he had the help of Beiju, he had asked a disciple from a small Han sect to borrow the Jade Elixir Essence Pool in order to cover it up. That year, he had promised that if there was an outstanding disciple in the sect for 260 years, he could bring him into his sect to cultivate. Today, he had taken in another disciple, so he also thought of this matter. However, if everything went smoothly during his closed-door meditation this time, he would need to go to the floating heavenly palace to cultivate and would not have time to care about this matter. If this Han disciple came looking for him, he could not break his promise. Therefore, after thinking for a while, he wrote a letter and sent it to Lu Mainyang. Today was a troubled time, so he tried not to let his disciples go out. This woman was Jinren Yuaning, so even if she left the house, it would not be a big deal. He could rest assured that she would handle this matter. After sending the letter, he sat silently for a moment, adjusted his heart and qi, and got up to go into the small mirror. After stepping into this world, he leaped into the air and sat down in the bamboo house. With a wave of his hand, 2 jade bottles flew out and placed in front of the couch, one on the left and one on the right. They were the metal and fire qi that Lu Yenny had found. Zhang Yan looked at them for a moment and pointed his finger. The jade bottle that contained the qi of Gung Exin metal trembled and opened the bottle stopper. The sharp qi of gold that was originally curled up inside suddenly lost its suppression and could not stay there any longer. A ray of qi rushed straight up, as if it was going to break through the bamboo house. Unhurriedly, he opened his mouth and spat out a puff of smoke that was as white as snow. Immediately flew out and wrapped around the golden chi. No matter how it struggled, it could not escape. With a slight movement, he sucked in a wisp of it into his stomach. Then, he reached out his hand and the dansha pressed down, suppressing the remaining chi of essence into the bottle. With a turn of his wrist, the bottle stopper popped out and was sealed again. The jade bottle shook a few times before it stopped moving. Among the chi of 5 elements, the chi of gold was sharp and the chi of fire was fierce. These two were the hardest to tame, especially the chi of gold, which was not easy to bind. During the refining process, if one was not careful, it would disappear without a trace. Fortunately, Zhang Yan had already cultivated 3 types of true light and was not a newbie. He was already familiar with this and easily tamed the chi of gold. Next, he only needed to follow the prescribed order and refine the chi of essence according to the method. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.